All right, here we go. Episode 37 coming at you fast and furious. I'm your host, Nick Peppard. Sean is unfortunately unable to make it at this time. He may chime in here later, but yeah, pretty excited. Episode 37. Got a pretty special guest on the show tonight. Hailing from Atlanta, Georgia, the Cobb captain, the OG of Reformation training, twice reformed. Some may even call him the Sultan of Search. My friend, my brother, and one of the coolest cats I know in the fire service, Dustin Martinez. What's up, bro?
None of those nicknames are accurate, but I appreciate it and thank you for the opportunity to be here, Dick.
Yeah, man. I've been saving up for this all day.
You never fail at embarrassing me. It's just a magical trick. Since that one time you played, I think Welcome to Atlanta. You just want to see how weird you can make it. You continue to thrive.
I do what I can, man. I do what I can. So, hey, I told you we're gonna have fun. So,
I'm all in. I'm all in.
Right off the diving board, head first, man. No
crushing it.
Yeah, man.
And I won't make any bad jokes. I promise.
I will. I've already made a couple, so we're on a roll.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So, long time coming. I actually am almost ashamed that it took us to season 3, halfway through season 3, to have you on the show. But definitely honored to have you here, man. I think it's always good to talk shop with you. Always good to see your beautiful face, even if you are on the other end of the screen. One of these days we'll have to catch up in person. I know Mavsy, I was hoping to catch you, but we all know how that is. It's wide open from start to finish, and you got a lot of big things going on in life, man. You another kid on the way, going back to school, doing all sorts of fun stuff in life. So with that, if you don't mind, man, give us a little background, kind of where you started your journey in the fire service, what got you into being a fireman, and kind of where you're at now.
Yeah, and don't worry about, the time it took or anything like that. Season 1's always the best. Season 2, the sequel always sucks. And then about season 3, the writers make men's. So here I am. No, so super, I guess, unconventional story for me in the fire service. I don't have anything overly cool. Was just kind of trying to find something to do. Super into sports growing up, playing football, wrestling, men's volleyball back home, grew up in Las Vegas, Nevada. And about sophomore, junior year, I realized that being 5'9" and a Mexican Jew would really have no progressive steps past high school sports. So about that time, I had a good friend. I went to start doing lifeguard classes, just, make some money. And he was an explorer, and he just went through one of those. It was the Northern Nevada Fire and Rescue Academy, which is, kind of like that West Coast model where a fire college and get your certifications. California, Florida have a bunch of them. Nevada only has one, and it was up in Northern Nevada. So talked to him a little bit about it, got in the Explorer post at, 15, 16 years old, and just realized this is what I wanted to do. Very small but tight family growing up. So once I kind of got exposed to the fire service and that family concept that it has, and the brotherhood and sisterhood, and someone told me if you love the fire service, it'll love you back in more ways than you can ever imagine, and that's 100% accurate. So once I was exposed to that family camaraderie, I was hooked. So went to Northern Nevada Fire and Rescue Academy, got my certifications, and kind of what I was told at 18 back home in Vegas was either you go to wildland or you go to medic school. And I think everybody knows my stance on medic school, so I went and decided to do some wildland while I was trying to get hired, and did that. And that was an awesome, great experience working in a hand crew back in Southern Nevada, and just doing the young firefighter trying to get hired thing, throwing apps in everywhere and anywhere. So Vegas, the Valley, Henderson, Northtown, California, LA, Phoenix, Denver, Dr. Cog, and all those tests. And had a friend that same guy that I talked to years ago, he ended up getting hired with Cobb County, which is where I work. And he said, hey man, it's a little bit less competitive in the metro Atlanta area than it is in some of these other West Coast departments. So Atlanta, Cobb, and Gwinnett had a test the same week, threw my app in, and it kind of has been a whirlwind ever since, right? I never thought I'd move cross country and work in metro Atlanta. for a department I had never heard of, and it's been the best thing that ever happened to me. So, that's kind of how we got here. It's nothing crazy, but my neighbors, I'm in the garage, my neighbors drive by. She's so nice. But that's kind of how we got here.
Yeah, man. So, what year did you come over to Cobb?
So I started here in 2010,
Okay.
and very fortunate to have some outstanding officers in the young parts of my career. I was passionate about the fire service. I knew it's what I wanted to do, but at that point, I was kind of work out a lot and chase girls and try and find a lifted truck, and I thought that's what the fire service was all about. The young single 5 years and under firefighter. I was that. I was trying
Yeah.
to find a more expensive diesel truck at that point. Even though I had like a little Canyon, it was like gonna get it. So a lot of passion, but not necessarily in the right places. And I had some tremendous mentors that realized that and started. You can enjoy those things and those aspects, but don't let your actions uh, as a byproduct of being a young single fireman ruin the ability to be a young single fireman. So kind of guided me down the right path. Great officers, and they just started working with me. And I can remember like plain as day during a search drill. Tom Hancock, uh, who's our training chief, we were searching, and it was the old elephant walk thing because that's what I had learned, and that's what some of the other guys with experience had learned, and just super tired, and like the middle of it being him saying like, "Hey, idiot, like get below and just look," and you're like, "Oh, there's a leg right there," but we were about to crawl this whole room, and that's kind of where it's like there's more to than just being in shape, so you're not as tired. And fitness is obviously important, but I was just working out for dumb reasons. It wasn't assisting anything, so I started applying that, and it's just been super fortunate to be at busy companies, great officers, and went as an engine firefighter, and then made engineer, and back to an engine, and then was able to be a truck drive the tiller. Then I made lieutenant, which in our system goes back to an engine, and so I've been able to be on both sides of that, working engine truck in each rank, and then finally been a captain now for about a little over, I guess, 3 years on a truck company, and I was very fortunate to move over to the truck at my same house and same shift. So I went from the engine lieutenant to the truck officer.
Nice. Yeah, it's always cool when you can kind of stay in house and just move across the floor.
Kept the locker. That's all that counts,
Yeah, man. So, for those that don't know you, you're obviously Georgia smoke diver. Been involved in that program. I just want to talk about like your mindset. Like, when was it in your career where you're like, hey, this is something I want to do? Did you have some kind of people that kind of guided you down that path to kind of give you that nudge, like, hey, this might be good for you, or I mean, like, what kind of prompted that in your mind? Where like, this is something I'm going to go do this.
Yeah, so I think I'm also like the worst advocate for the program. In recruit school, we wear our rockers on our uniform shirts. So you'd see a couple guys at recruit school that from the field and be like, "Hey, man, what's that about?" And they'd be like, "Oh, talk about it a little bit, give you supporters," and then it's always like, "When you get off probation, dude, give it a shot." And I was like, all right, I'd felt that I was in pretty decent shape, and I wanted to give it a shot. And I tell all people, like, I give the worst advice because I think I was like 23 when I went into it. So, I'd done wildland and still pretty relatively new out of the academy. So fitness wise, I was in one of the better positions I've been you could be in. So started kind of talking to some people, and I actually got into, they have an in-state test and an out-of-state test. So I did the in-state test. I made it, but I was still on probation. So the department, put the kibosh on that, got to get off probation. So kind of took, some time and was like, maybe I'll go back and give it a shot. And my engineer at the time, Mike Barnett, who is awesome and one of the most mentally tough guys I know, he was like, "Hey, man, I got an email that a bunch of people dropped out and classes in 10 days. So if there's something you're interested in, like, shoot an email to Brent Hollander and get in." So, I was like, well, all right. So shot an email, and like 30 minutes later, it's like, "Hey, you're in. Test is Saturday, class starts Sunday." So I didn't have tons of time to prepare. And so I put an SCBA mask on and I went to our local LA Fitness and I just did some spin classes and just see like, how bad could it be? And I was very fortunate that, I was in decent shape and had like zero preparation, even though, our crews trained a good bit. I really didn't know what I was getting into until I showed up, and then it was game on.
Yeah. So that's quite, I mean, yeah, that's one of those things. I mean, I feel like for guys that, talk to, they've gone through the program and um, one of the better programs out there if you really want to test your metal a little bit and kind of, and learn some stuff, right? Learn some stuff that's going to potentially save your life, save someone else's life. I mean, it just seems like all the guys I've met that have come through there, just a slightly different, mindset maybe than guys that haven't been through the program. And I think like maybe it's just, you kind of know where that, you've been beyond the perceived walls and you've hit, they kind of take you through that, right? And kind of work you through not just that initial, like, oh, I'm tired. Like, then you
Yeah,
realize the light comes on and says, hey, how much do you still have left in the tank and keep going and being able to function and work as a team in a high stress environment when you're tired.
that's certainly a component of it. And I think it's important, to say that that program is certainly not and should not be the pinnacle of your career.
Mm-hmm.
I think if the highlight of your career is that you graduated the Georgia Smoke Diver program, like I feel bad for how terrible of a career you've had.
Sure.
And in all reality, the fortunate side of it, or I should say, the greatest impact that program has is the ability when you can come back and see on the other side of assisted instructing and learning, because for the most part, you're in survival phase. You're going to do pretty heavy calisthenics in the morning. You're going to get fatigued as the intention is prior to learning and drilling, and to create that stress on yourself. And then you're going to go through the evolutions and try and complete them. And does it push you? Absolutely. There's some times that things that you think remedial or easy tasks on a bay floor, even in a training tower, when you're fatigued with live fire, I would say I'm very proud of the culture of Search in my organization, and some of the worst performers during heat day on Search are Cobb Fire guys. And it's this like, we think we do well and we do well when tested, but that lackadaisical attitude sometimes plus the fatigue really changes some stuff. And so I think that is all important. The program allows you to find, not necessarily what your limitations are. For some, they've probably never hit their limitations in that program, and for some, they exceeded what they thought they were capable of doing. But it certainly is a test to see what you can do and how far you can go, in some environments that you may never encounter until the real world, or coming back to help instruct. But the big thing for me is the ability to talk to 70 to 100 guys a day on the instructor side from all over the country now. And, what are you guys doing here for this? How do you set this up? And some of the most humble dudes that are starting, these could be pipe hitters in their organization, which is like the buzzword in the fire service, right? That means they're legitimate. And they come there, and for the first class or two, they're flipping burgers, and they're responsible for filling air bottles and scooping chili. But yet, like, then you can have time to talk to them, and they just understand that wherever they need to go in that program to make sure it can operate day in day out, they're going to be there.
Yeah.
And that to me is the greatest part of it. Like I can network, I can shoot the shit, I can identify practices from across the country, and I can see 70 to 100 dudes that really could care less what they're doing there that day, as long as it's to make sure that program operates. And they're all doing it for absolutely nothing. Yeah. And I'm glad we don't get paid to go back. And I think that's the beauty of it too, is not a single instructor is paid while they do it. And it's all to make sure that program continues.
Yeah.
And to see it expand, there's, the Florida program that has been in existence before we started. And, they're kind of Florida 2.0 now. They had a makeover several years ago, and they're crushing it as always. And now you see Oklahoma and Indiana, and that's kind of the expansion of our program. And Operation Trojan Horse continues, and you start seeing these little sleeper cells pop up. And I think that's huge too, because you might have somebody from California or Utah that can't necessarily get to Georgia with all of their gear, but they can drive to an Oklahoma. Or I had a guy, my partner I graduated with in my class was from Wisconsin, Ben Kranick, and now if he was to attempt again, it may be easier for him to drive to Indiana and do that program there. So to start seeing those things pick up, and we got guys in Idaho and Colorado and some other places that are wanting to, and heck, even I believe 2 or 3 classes ago, we had our first Nevada smoke diver make it through. So that's cool to see. Unfortunately, it's from Carson City, but the North is the North, and but it's when I first went through it, I didn't think we'd see anybody from Nevada or California. Now we got guys attempting and trying to make it work. So
that's awesome.
Super pumped.
Yeah, no, it's a damn good program. I mean, anybody that has been around guys know, definitely a close knit group. It seems like the guys that have been through, there's something there that it's a bond, right? It's a common experience that you've been through, and like I said, definitely mad respect for the program, mad respect for what you guys do. But so let's talk about also
real quick. I would say that for it's a 6-day class, and it's just a 6-day class, and if you make this monster before you even show up, like, you're not going to make it. But if sure. It's just 6 days, and it's just a class, and it's a starting point. It should not be the end point for people.
Would you say it's more mental than physical?
Oh yeah. And everybody's different. I mean, if you're in physical shape, it will assist you in recovery. Like, that to me is the hands down top benefit of being in shape going into that program, is the recovery aspect with your better fitness levels. There's some other things too, but they really do have nutrition dialed in with you do calorie logs, and you watch what you eat, and you track your hydration, and they're doing hydration testing every morning to make sure you're where you need to be. There's constant feedback on how you're doing, for everything going into your body. But I've seen absolute studs just not want to be cold or wet, and I've seen guys that you thought no business being there make it through and never stop. So everybody's different, but I would say that mentally people will tap long before they physically give out. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, fair enough. So I want to talk a little bit just briefly about MAFC. You've been involved with that over the years. And so when we first met years ago, definitely one of those conferences that it's on my calendar every year, just because I really, I believe in what you guys are doing. And that is, trying to have affordable training for firemen to come train and get better. And I love it because it's just firemen helping firemen get better. And you guys have been doing it now for over a decade. Where did you kind of get your start or involvement in MAFC? Did you, I know you taught over the years there, you've been on the board, you've kind of filled a lot of different hats and roles in that conference, but just kind of, the backstory on how you kind of got involved with it, and then to where, where it started to where it's at today, and some of the things that maybe you're most proud about or excited about watching it kind of develop and morph over the years. But yeah, let's go kind of back to the start of how you, were you on the ground with that when it got started? Is that something you were on the ground with, or did you kind of get involved, a couple years in, or how did that transform for you?
I was, so I was actually in recruit school the first year that the Metro Atlanta Firefighter Conference started. So, at that point, they had just kind of gotten it off the ground, and they come in and tell us, hey guys, if you want to go, like, these days is when MAFC is, and you're more than welcome to go, and it's free for you since you work here. And little did they tell us that it's free for everybody, but we were like, awesome. And right, wrong, or different, the attitude when you're like 21 in the academy is, I can wear my uniform outside of the academy and I'll look like a real fireman. I'm in, so we show up to MAFC and we're strutting around, and it was awesome. It was absolutely awesome. And I can remember year one, Dave McGrail, the older guys on the board talk about it all the time. He was the first one that took a chance on it. Like, they reached out and it was, hey, we can't pay you, we can get you here, but this is something we're trying to do to bring, high quality national level instructors to at least the metro area and get it off the ground. So I saw it year one. I was a student, and after I heard about it, I was like, "This is awesome." And about year 3 or 4, after taking some classes, it was like, "Hey, how do I help it out?" And at that point, Colin Kelly and some Vegas guys got accepted into the conference, which was a big deal for me to see some of the West Coast make it over here. And I was just like, I'll drive them. I'll be the chaperone. That way I speak their language. I have flat bills. I'll be it. And so, I kind of got linked up with them. And from there, that year and then the next year is a little bit more like, what can you do a little bit more? And sure. And so I've transitioned. I did some instructor stuff where I was working on, getting instructors, the yeses and nos, and reaching out and just being like, hey, man, this is what we do. And I was wondering if you could help us out with it. And I totally get, between the time with people's family and the time it takes to develop programs and classes, I understand completely for those that can't do it. But, for our mission is to offer affordable training to firefighters. And so that means, if you can get to Atlanta, you can go to the conference. Like, all lectures are free for all students. There was a big conundrum in the board several years ago when we had to raise the 8-hour cost from 80 to $90, and you would have thought, it was a battle. But for us, we beg, borrow, and steal, and we ask anybody and everybody, and tons of people volunteer their time and effort to make that program work. And I think that's the beauty of it. If you wanted to go to a 4-day conference in Metro Atlanta with MAPC, essentially it's 2 days of lectures, which would be free, and you would do 2 8-hour hands-on, which are $90 each. So $180 for 4 days of training from top-level national instructors, and that's the goal. And for those guys that can't make it to some of the bigger conferences or can't afford it, or those departments that can't do it, it's hey, if you get here, we'll make sure you have a conference to go to, and that's always been it. So now I've transitioned into the chief libations officer. So I just make sure that our social events are squared away and where we need to be, and I've been working with some of the local community partners to get a good place for our firefighters to fellowship after. So we're super excited next year for the dates because the Braves will be in town. So Braves games are always good, and everybody enjoys that. The Battery's a good time, and Red Hair and McCracken's has been huge supporters of ours. So
Yeah, no, hands down, man. Like I said, if you've never been to MAFC, check them out. Metro Atlanta Firefighters Conference. What year is this going into for you guys? This has got to be what, 12, 13?
I believe
14
it's going to
maybe?
be 14.
14, yeah.
Yeah. So
I was gonna say, it's been
2010. It's 14 or 15. Probably 15. I could be wrong, but 14 or 15.
It's always a good time, man. Like, I love it, man. Just guys hustling, working hard, learning, growing, sharing camaraderie, laughs.
And it's cool to see it expand.
Yeah.
Now we're over 1,000 signups for hands-on and lectures, and that's just the online registrants. We always have walk-ups, and our instructors are under the same mindset.
Yeah,
to be able to plug them in.
Yep.
Hey, we got 3 students that showed up. They came from North Carolina. Could you take them on? And sure, and I think everybody understands that mission set. And I think the biggest thing we're proud of, besides that ability to give affordable training to our firefighters, is it started a lot of people's instructing careers. We, especially in the state, we're big on taking chances on people. But even if you don't have to be 5, 7, 9 conferences under your belt, we'll research or we'll reach out and try and get some information and give some people shots. And a lot of times it's worked out. We've launched a lot of careers, and a lot of instructors have started at MAPC or come through MAPC early on, and to see them grow and progress, that's the other awesome thing too.
Yeah, man. You guys, like I said, it's always a good group of guys teaching. Always a pretty good mix of different kinds of classes. Different personalities from all over the country, and like I said, man, if people listen to this, if you've never been, do yourself a favor, check them out. It really is a good time. It's one of those places, like I said, that for me, that was kind of what started. I had an experience in my career pretty shortly after MAPC started with, and we'll get into this more in a little bit, but had a search and a rescue of a victim, and honestly, man, like, I was pretty comfortable in my career at this point. I've been on the job, I don't know, this is 2012-ish, 2011, 2000. Yeah, it's 2012. I'm sorry, May of 2012. Um, and I'd heard of MAFC. A couple guys like the first couple years have been like, "Hey, you should come up to this," and had that experience where I got a little rude awakening, got humbled on a call
Sure.
that maybe it kind of woke me up and made me realize like, hey, you don't know as much as you think you know. And so some guys like, hey man, you really should come to this training. And it was that year that I went to MAFC for the first time. And I just remember like thinking to myself, I got to learn more. Like I got to get in on stuff like this more. And it just, I think like it was the first like fire conference outside of like the state stuff that I'd, been
Sure.
to, and the IFF stuff, which is, a whole different animal. Been to some local trainings, things like that, but to go to, out of state, go to something like this and be around, at that time, it wasn't 1,000 people signing up. There's a few hundred maybe. And, but it was just, I just remember thinking, man, there's like 300 other firefighters here that are hungry, that want to learn, that want to grow, that, egos are checked at the door. We're just here to get better and learn and grow. And I just remember thinking to myself, man, like this is freaking awesome. And going back and just being fired up. And of course, I found out that everybody back on the job wasn't as fired up as I was. But,
Sure.
It was really, kind of a, it was kind of one of the things, in my career that I look back and it was like, it was the first real conference out of state that I'd gone to. And it changed my trajectory because it challenged me to get outside my bubble. It challenged me to push myself to learn to be better. And so for me, like I said, it's been a staple, man. Every year that I can make, I try to get there because it really is, something that I just love going and being around people that want to get better. And they don't, like I said, you go there and everybody's has a good time. And, and I love the fact that you guys are just very much like humble, down to earth. You're firemen. Everybody there is just a group of firemen that want to hang out and do fireman shit. And to me, like there's something to be said for that, and like I said, I mean, there's a lot of different conferences out there, but for me, like I said, MAFC always holds a special place because of where I was in my career the first time I went and what it meant to kind of open my eyes to what was outside of my four walls. And so I challenge anybody, like I said, if you're looking for a conference that, because that's the thing, like guys, well, I can't afford to go to FDIC. I can't afford to go here. Can't afford to go there. Like you said, find a ride, find someone that's going for a couple $100, less than a couple $100. You could literally have 4 days of badass training and fellowship and learning. And, that's like I said, it's worth it. And so, yeah, that's awesome, man. I think it's kind of one of those things that somewhere our paths cross. That's where I kind of met you and had a lot of respect from you, obviously, since then. And you've been down to Florida at the North Florida Fire Expo a couple times,
Yeah, it's my favorite conference. If you don't go to North Florida Fire Expo, you're an idiot. There you go.
But I mean, like seriously, man, you guys, really early on when we were getting off the ground, have kind of always supported us and been there for us and helped teach and do things. And
yeah,
man,
and
you guys,
I think a lot of us, have seen the difficulty, like, and the beauty. There's this beauty of these small conferences or small training sessions that are breaking out throughout the country, and it's dealing with MAFC. Like, I understand the difficulty of those things, and I understand how hard it can be to get those off the ground or secure funding or try and make them work. And it's, if we can support it, we're always going to do that, and it certainly helps. When you're on the beach and it's only like a 5 or 6 hour drive, that's a big selling point that we could selfishly, we get to go visit Florida, but at the end of the day, like, a lot of it for our guys is they understand what you guys have gone through, and they understand what a lot of these small conferences are trying to do and the mission they're trying to accomplish, and we'll support those things in any way. Like, we're obviously toning some stuff back because of personal reasons, but it's something we're willing to do.
yeah, no, it's I think it says something though. Firefighters
Hold on
support
one
each
second.
other. So
You go to bed? Can you? Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. Always take time for fame, bro.
Yeah.
So,
oh yeah, it's bath time. So.
Yeah, no, it's like I said, those guys supporting other firemen doing training, and I think like that's kind of the cool thing. Over the last 10 years, watching other training stuff pop up and guys getting involved with training. There's definitely more of it out there and more availability than ever before. I think back when I first got on the job, and there was a handful of, there's a couple of big conferences, obviously, then you got a handful of regional stuff. But there really wasn't anything like there is now, where there's every week just about you could throw a dart at the map and find training somewhere. So it's out there. If you want to learn, if you want to get better, if you want to, whatever it is you want to do, there's opportunities probably more now than ever before. Social media has made the fire service a much smaller place. There's, I mean, literally people
and
that
I
are.
can remember, like, not that it was that long ago, but I came up in kind of a West Coast paramilitaristic concept, and even
Mhm.
coming to Cobb County, like MAPC was the first. There's other people out there doing stuff that you can listen and apply it to what you're doing or what you're trying to accomplish. And selfishly as a department, Cobb has benefited greatly from MAPC being in its backyard, because our guys go to all these different classes and all these different instructors, and you Frankenstein the best things together, and you make it work. But the information's there, and this, between, like you said, social media has shrunken it. The internet, I can call somebody, text somebody, Facebook message somebody, and ask, what are you guys doing in you know Phoenix, or what are you guys doing in Seattle, or what are you guys doing anywhere in the country. And probably by the end of the day, I have like SOGs, or even like recruit school PowerPoints, or information. And then you even see stuff like the firefighter rescue survey, right, where they've created this central hub that you can submit your information to of what's working, and utilizing these platforms to make it better. But these small conferences are, to me, they take away the ability to say you don't have any options to go to outside training. They're everywhere. And I would also say to all those conferences, like, hey, stop dirtbagging and don't do the week before, week after MAPC. Selfishly, we're trying to keep the city of Atlanta on lock, but it's awesome. You can't be a fan of the fire service, a fan of training, and not think that it's awesome that every region, every weekend, there's some training going on. That if people want to get better, like, it's on them. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, it takes away the excuse, like you said. I mean, at the end of the day, if you want to get better, there are opportunities. And so that being said, I'm going to kind of shift gears here, and kind of get into, let's talk about search a little bit. Let's talk about specifically the search culture at Cobb. And you guys have really, over the last few years, especially, man, I feel like there's been a really big presence when it comes to the search world out of Cobb. A lot of great learning moments and videos and stories that have been shared. But I just want to talk about the culture there, and where it came from, as far as the mindset shift of like, hey, we're about this. Like, we're going to make a big push here, because you guys have to do like a whole search week every year, right? You got like a department wide search week, which is awesome. But the history of where the cultural shift came from, if you will. Is that something that's happened in the last decade or so, that there's been a big push in training and mindset with search, or is that something that's just going to organically happen over the last couple decades, or where do you guys get your mindset from when it comes to fireground operations, and most specifically the search mindset and the push? Because I tell you, man, like I look at what you guys are doing, and I can't help but be really just blown away with the quality of the mindset. It seems to impermeate so many of your guys that are they're there for them. They're there to search. They're here to make a difference. And it seems like the training and the mindset is definitely paying off for you guys. It seems like you guys have had a big, some pretty good successes over the last few years that have been able to share with the fire service and help other people kind of almost, use it as a template for their organizations.
Yeah, I think first off, it's every level that's supportive of that mindset. And so, I can kind of give you our history. I am not the one that implemented, nor am I the one that's created the search culture or operations in our department. I'm just, I think I was fourth or fifth in line of taking over the program. Um, in lineage, so it's something where I was just able to continue what's already been established, and put my twist on it and kind of build it up. And now we pass it on to the next guy, who Jimmy Gregory is doing tremendous work, because he's taken it even further than it can go than I could take it. So for us, I can remember in recruit school being shown VES for the first time, and that was something I had never heard of. And this is 2010, and we all know whether you call it window search or just search, or other departments in the Northeast have done it quite regularly. It was certainly a new concept for me coming from where I came from, and even then, it was still kind of that slow implementation in the department, because at the time it was, hey, this is pretty much only when like mom meets you on the front yard and they're pointing to a window and that's where you're going. And that wasn't necessarily some of the members' mindset, but that was kind of the official stance. We had a May Day with the VES that didn't go well, and that was prior to that recruit school. So there was this, how do we don't want to write this off completely, but every level of the organization has different priorities. So there was this concern of is it dangerous? And a lot of those things come from lack of understanding, lack of education. So if you really peel it back, 2007, if I remember off the top of my head, to 06, 07, we had our largest civilian fatality fire, and that was a double-wide mobile home that resulted in the loss of life of 8 people. So for our county, that was certainly impactful. 3 generations of a family wiped out on a single incident, and it wasn't that the culture wasn't aggressive, but it wasn't necessarily expecting to find victims on these incidents. And there's some of the forefathers of our search program, Tom Hancock, Kevin Lewis, Kevin Gross, some of these guys, Mickey Clark, some of these guys that were really pushing it and had taken it and was like, we're going to make this better. And really all truck operations, but search was definitely the push. They started running with that program. And I was fortunate to just be a grunt and a dummy resetter in the early stages of it. And then, somebody sicks out or somebody's got to go to the bathroom and they're like, hey, you're talking for this next station. And that's kind of just slowly how it's built up, but it's supported at every level. And as much paramedic jokes as I make, and my stance on it, right? Like the organization department's philosophy of going from a cyno kit on every battalion car to now on every ALS unit, and EMTs understanding not necessarily how to administer, but how to mix it and make it so that if the option's there, the early compressions, which we learned from one of our incidents, we learned on that, and the willingness of even our department's leadership, top brass, to allow ourselves to talk about these incidents. And that's a big one too. If we were to be hush hush and keep everything close to the vest, like not only could others not learn from our mistakes, but the ability for others to say like, hey, you could have done this, or talk about their best practices from their organization, that's helped us too. And it's really cool to see, for us, the buy-in and the effort from all parts of the department. Our search program, so we do in recruit school, is now 5 days. It's a search week, and it starts with a basic lecture where they really drill in that lecture why we do it. There's the how to do it is all the hands-on component. So making sure we meet some state requirements, obviously, to do what has to be done, but it's really driving home the whys and all these examples and case studies of when people say no, like there's a chance. And chance sometimes wins out, and showing them what failure really means and when we can and when we can't go, and how that concept looks. And then they'll go into that crawl, walk, run component. So for the first 2 days or a day and a half after that lecture, it's really no packs, just in turnout gear, and it's crawl. It's this is how we VES, this is how we search for victims, this is how we drag, this is what we're doing off the ladder, this is what we're doing through a window, this is how we get them out of a window. And it's introductory level, and then we start ramping it up with some candy smoke. And day 4, we always take them to some type of acquired structure or offsite facility. This last one, we had 2 of them, so we were able to do day 3 and 4. They were at 2 separate sites, split the class, and they went half and half to, and that really finds out who's cheating, because you learn the tower pretty quickly, and also gives them more of a realistic approach of what they're going to see. And that day 5 is awesome. It also encourages that concept. It pays to be a winner. So it's really only 4 scenarios in day 5, but they're very realistic and they're very chaotic. And even as something simple as we have a live fire ignition team in the department, and they're there just building smoke. Like they don't get to instruct, they don't get to see the benefit of it. They're isolated in a couple spots in the tower, but they understand the importance of what they're doing, and they're just in there just chugging hay smoke for hours and hours and hours to make sure that they can create as realistic conditions as possible for our guys. And our recruits are, basically they get live actors, and they get fences, and they have to force doors, and they have to throw ladders, and they have overhead obstructions, and they have victims that they got to deal with. And it's start to finish of, you pull up because, they may go 5 or 6 years before they're on that incident that has a victim, but they may also do it 3 days after graduation. And, we really want to push just as much as how to search and how to pull the victims out as the decision-making component. And so allowing the recruits to make some of those decisions that, typically an officer may have. In a year or two, they may be the senior firefighter in today's fire service in our department. So really pushing the decision-making component along with it, closed door isolate, take them out that window, or, you make the call for help, or you can handle it by yourself, or what's your egress pass looking like? Did you use secondary means of entrance or exit? Why did you choose that window? One of the big ones we do is a second floor VS on the Charlie side, and they encounter a gate and have to get navigate that. There's debris piles and obstacles in the back, and then there's overhead obstruction, so they have to scoop raise it. And all these things just take their mind off of the objective of VES in a window and getting victims out, but it makes it where they're having to deal and navigate and make decisions. And by the time they reach that window, it's like their brains are fried. And then you get them like, hey, we still have an objective to complete, and we just want them to get as close as they can to the real world, but give them that confidence of, you instinctively did all these things right, and we have some stuff to work on, but you are an objective-driven task, and we've given you the tools to complete that. So it's a long week, but they feel, the big thing we wanted was they feel like they've accomplished something. They truly have accomplished something. And you got guys and crews that are done at 9:30 in the morning on their last day. They go 4 for 4, and it pays to be a winner. And they're standing watching the rest of the recruits do evolution 2 or 3 on these, and that's been really cool to see. The search component of the department, we do spring and fall drills typically. In the last several years, it's been searching or VES or moving past the initial room, and drags and carries, and there's always some type of search component in that, and you're seeing it pretty regularly on the fire grounds. That second assignment is search. You may go a third assignment when a search company is finally assigned, but very early on. And our guys also prepare for those unique ones where, we would say 99% of our fires, the first company's pulling the line, but for that 1%, you're either having to VES or hit the target right off the bat, or you're having to apply water and search with that first in company, depending on where somebody's coming from. So the crews are doing really good. The officer corps has been more motivated than it's ever been. And it's cool to see. And just, I think it's 5 or 6 days ago, they had a fire where they ended up pulling 3 civilians out from 3 different points in the building. And that was crews, one crew VES the Delta, one crew took a hose line through a window to make the push because the front patio was collapsed, the front porch was collapsed, and they didn't have an entrance point. And another crew made it through the Charlie side. So you saw all these crews just committing manpower to hold the fire and buy searchable real estate and get in and get them out. So it's really cool to see, and I wish I could say I'm a proud papa of it, but I just continued what's already been done by my mentors and those that built the program.
Yeah, man, that is, it's outstanding for any organization to really take that much of a buy-in to a certain mindset, tactic, whatever it is. I mean, and for an organization of the larger variety, you guys are not a small job. You guys, how many houses you guys got?
We're 29 stations.
29 stations, and roughly how many guys?
29 stations, 700 field personnel.
So yeah, it's not, definitely not a small job by any means. And people have been around the fire service long enough know, like, it's a lot of work to change a department's culture and mindset towards anything. It doesn't matter what it is. To get that many people to buy into any one thing says a lot. It says a lot about the predecessors that laid the groundwork to kind of shift that focus and maybe not, not that you didn't search and do things before, like you said, but to really emphasize and put that exclamation point on the importance of getting in there, being aggressive, getting these people out as quickly as possible in the most effective and efficient means possible. I think that's the biggest thing, and to get people that are committed to that mindset from top to bottom, it takes some doing. And so, like I said, a testament to both the officers, the firefighters, everybody involved in making that possible. Because, like I said, I mean, it just goes to show when people believe in what they're doing, right, and are committed to it. The great things that you can accomplish as an organization, as a shift, as a crew. There's something to be said for that, right? So you mentioned earlier
And it's a lot easier. The easiest way to change a culture is recruit school.
Sure.
They don't know anything. They don't
Yeah.
know better. So you're telling them this is how we do it, and they're all on board. And then that starts trickling out. And the big thing is then you got to make sure your officers are aware of the information coming out. And I will say, like, for our yearly mandatory training that everybody does, whether it's Target Solutions or Fire Rescue, whatever program you're using, right? Ours is an in-house developed search program, so they do that. It's not this canned IFSA book. It's a 1 hour component to just re-up some of the search stuff and make sure it's fresh on their mind for that mandatory state hours. But then we're doing quite a bit of drills throughout the organization and the department, and I think there's also testament to the department to take that stance of, we're going to invest in cyno kits for every ALS apparatus, and we're going. We learned from some incidents and our training where it was pull them out, leave them on the ground, and then go back in and finish the search. And now it's the other day they said, hey man, it was like recruit school where the guy pulled him out and he immediately started compressions until somebody's like, I got him, and he went back in. And you see some of these helmet cams and they're victim, I got his wrist, or here I got his legs, victim, and you're finally seeing and one of those is a probie, so to see that a couple months out of recruit school, and he goes right back to what we drilled for those days and playing his day on these helmet cams, and it does help that you get some wins. It would certainly be harder if over the 12 years that we've tried to implement this change, if we didn't have any fires with civilians, but we've had more in the last 13 years than we had the previous 40 as an organization. So those wins help certainly, and I think both as a department, as a fire service, removing that whole you'll go your whole career and never make a grab. Like, stop it. Stop telling people that.
Yeah.
You may go your whole career and not have hands on a victim, but you'll be on a fire where there's a civilian entrapped, and it
Sure.
might be you'll be the nozzleman, you'll be the pump operator, you'll be the chief, or you'll be outside team taking a window, whatever it may be. Like, there will be a time in your career you will encounter a civilian in a building, and we have to stop creating this lackadaisical attitude that it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I think there's some cultural conditioning, and I've seen in my career where organizations almost there's a stark contrast. I look what you guys are doing, and I look across the country, and that's not always the case. There's organizations that do tell people this stuff, and it's almost like we condition people to write people off, condition people to fail, condition people to to not be methodical in their or purposeful in their search culture, because we have textbooks out there teaching search techniques that just are not as effective for rescuing victims,
Sure.
and there's textbooks out there saying that it's, VES is not safe, or, I mean, we've had that in the past, people saying that it's not safe, or it's a big city tactic, or, hey, you're not going to ever, you're going to go your whole career, like you said, and never rescue a victim and all this kind of stuff. And like, so then when they get faced with that, all of a sudden it's like, holy shit, it's actually happening.
Yeah.
And they're not conditioned and prepared for that moment. And so let me ask you this. Do you think, you said that in the last 13 years that you guys have had more wins than the previous 40 years as far as grabs and documented rescues in your organization? Do you feel like the culture and the mindset and preparing people for that moment has created more opportunities, has put them in a position to make viable grabs more? because of the mindset, because of the culture, because of the expectations from the organization? Do you feel like that is contributed to those numbers a little bit? And kind of one of those things like luck favors the prepared, that saying.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that has kind of been the case from what you've seen in your part of the world? Do you, or do you think it's just, I mean, is it just coincidence that those numbers are so much higher in the last 13 than the previous 40? Or do you really think that maybe it's one of those things that you're looking for those opportunities and you're preparing for those opportunities? And so you're, instead of a recovery, it's a rescue. You're making rescues because guys are actively going hard to go find those people.
Yeah, I think first off, I don't think it's right to necessarily take the simple approach of like, well, since we've got here, it's obviously us, that have changed that sway in the department.
Sure.
That's not the case. I think, and that stat can be manipulated too, because at some point, we didn't have air packs on the apparatus, so guys are less able to make some of the interior conditions that we're able to now, and there's obviously technology and our gear that's allowed us to do some things that our previous wouldn't. And at one point we did have 1.5-inch hose on our attack packages, and I know the DC boys will say that's all you need, but we've certainly had things progress as an organization.
Sure.
The training has gotten better in multiple things. Even as something we had nozzle forward come last year in the department, and for the ability for our guys to make attacks that we previously may not have attempted or been as aggressive, like that's assisted in it. And the increase in fire growth that UL has shown us, and the difference between modern and legacy construction and the furnishings, like these are all things that are components of it. But I do believe that our guys are looking for ways to get into spaces or create searchable spaces that they may not have in previous. But I don't think that's a knock necessarily to the previous generation. It's we certainly have the advantage between the information that's out there and the equipment that we have. It's never been better. And we had he's retired, but a district chief look at one of the helmet cams that one of our crews had not too long ago, and he was like, "Hey, it's remarkable, and it's not that we didn't want to do this. We just didn't know that this was possible, and we didn't know that some of this stuff was was out there. We didn't know what could be done." So it takes a lot for a leader in an organization to say that, but it's never been a better time for us in regards to the resources at our disposal, our staffing, our apparatuses, our equipment. All these things are components to it. But I certainly do believe that our guys are are always looking for windows or doors or opportunities, and that mindset has certainly flipped in the organization. Like, we put fires out to make it better for the civilians, and we search to get the civilians out. Like, one of the most beautiful things I think about my department is our incident priority. Our first one is protect and remove endangered occupants and treat the injured, and that's a little bit different than most of the fire services doctrine of life safety, because it removes that ability to say, is it ours or theirs, and kind of that concept. Well, if you just make it better for them, it's better for you too. So for the ability to say that our priority is a civilian, I think that paints an accurate picture of the organizational stance as it moves forward and progresses.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. And I guess like in my mind, I go to that saying, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah.
And I think in our line of work, like you said, training hard to create searchable space, i.e. getting a hand line, a proper GPM, being able to flow and move and put water aggressively on the scene of the fire, buying time for that search, allowing those guys to search more confidently, out ahead of the line or above the line or whatever the case may be. I think it does take a team. It does. I mean, obviously staffing helps, but I think training and mindset go a long way, right? That cultural expectation of, hey, like you said, we're going to put them first. Like, this is our default position is we're going to try to make it better for them, which in turn makes it better for us. Right. And it really is, a testament. Like I said, I can't help but think how many times people say, hey, this is never going to happen, or like, oh, the chance of that happen are slim. There's statements like that. You've traveled enough, man. You've heard all those different things thrown around.
Like that big push in the fire department is like, data driven, and we're a data driven organization with data driven fire service.
Yeah,
and that works to our advantage as well. if it was about the data, we wouldn't do CPR, right? Statistically speaking, like not good outcomes, but we give it a shot because there's a chance that it's going to work. And it's just the
Yeah.
just the opportunity to sway that back in the favor of the civilian. Like that's why we do it. And Kevin Lewis, one of my mentors, he always talks about the 21-9 principle. Like whenever they're in 9% oxygen, it's bad. When they're in 21% oxygen, it's good. Like get them out of the 9 or less and get them into the 21. A lot of things can happen. And we can do a lot of things on the outside for that civilian. We can secure airways. We can administer cyano kits. We can do compressions. Um, we can help them once we get them out. It's really just a battle for the unprotected respiratory tract. And so, we give them the shot, and as long as we're continuing to make sure like we can give them a fighting chance, like that's what it's about. And it's kind of cool that you'll between the overtime or just working around the department or listening out, fires go out and second unit gets on scene, and if they're not searching or assigned search, like you'll hear guys in the station like, "What about search?" And you're like, "We've made it. We finally made it." That even the brothers and sisters are tracking that. Hey, we're in search, and they'll ask, "Why didn't?" Well, we had this or we had that, or no, we were doing that in conjunction, and it's cool to see. It's very cool to see. I think everybody has problems, but that's certainly one I don't believe we have to the fullest extent. Is our guys are always looking to search, and they're doing better than they've ever been of trying to at least get in the game. You win some, you lose some, but you got to get in the game to play.
Yeah, facts, man. So you mentioned the data, and you mentioned firefighter rescue survey. So our buddy Nick Ledeen, obviously captain to be, or newly promoted Captain Ledeen, crushing it up there in Eau Claire.
Yeah.
He's got him and some of his brothers up there doing firefighter rescue survey. Man, are doing some really amazing stuff with the data when it comes to search and rescue, victim survivability, and things like that. And I just want to get, your takeaway, first of all, on the importance of the mission of firefighter rescue survey, the importance of having actual data in our hands to drive better techniques and decisions, number one. And then two, what are some big takeaways for you over the last couple of years of starting to see some of this data roll through? Has it shifted, your philosophy on anything? Are there things that you're looking at that you feel are like monumental wins for us to be able to look at and say, hey, you know what, we're doing this really, really well, or hey, maybe we can improve here. What is the data telling you?
Yeah, I mean, first off, like the work they do, and then the work Brian Brush has done, and a lot of these guys out there is it's phenomenal. And some of our stuff it's validating it, and some of it we've changed, because of those trends. Just the ability to track it, like the fact that we're not celebrating wins, we're learning from the wins. That's huge too. We've always been, you always see the stuff of civilian deaths and how it went wrong, but it was never how it went right and what went right. And it's been a huge resource for us, and I'm so glad that it's out there. And it's also cool to be friends with Nick and to work alongside him on some of our classes. And that's a big one. Is a lot of the stuff is I might have a teaching point or I might have a case study that we had in our department or surrounding jurisdiction, and Nick would be like, well, actually the data is actually already saying that. And we link it together and kind of do like statistics and then real world. If I could say just as simple as when I talked about bedrooms and the locations and the expectations of victims, that's something that we've certainly pushed. We used to be pretty heavy on search nearest to the fire and then the way out, and that's important, but we've really put the onus on the nozzle team to get to the scene of the fire and the pathway that they're traveling to get there, to quickly search that, while our search teams are going to some of those higher target hazard bedroom locations, or at least starting that. Even if you get to the bedrooms or the path to get to the bedrooms, you're going to probably encounter stairs and hallways or egress points anyway. So it brings that big piece of component there. And I think you just can see, with fires going down, the civilian deaths going up, we've never had more opportunity. We've never had less opportunity to get it right, but it's certainly never meant more. So, you would think that the civilian deaths would correlate with the drop in fires, but that's not the case. So as we see these fires going down, but civilian deaths essentially staying the same or even rising, it tells us that, we don't have the time and we have to be very good at it. So I think when you talk and at least implement the why in your organization, like we don't get the same opportunity, but it certainly hasn't gotten any easier for the civilians inside. Um, the Sino kits, you see the survivability on that. Like we've seen that same thing flip, and that's a big reason I believe of why we have continued to push them. The compressions early on, you look at that, and I would say even a big takeaway for me was the conditions of the civilians when they found them. You'll have a lot of people write off the civilians based on smoke conditions or even fire conditions, and you see some of these survival conditions with civilians coming out and still living. And I mean, what more do you need to see than like poor conditions don't necessarily always correlate or write off into poor outcomes. There's still an opportunity and a chance.
Man, yeah, it is really cool to see the numbers keep coming in and seeing some of that data being shared across the country. Still a lot of work to do. Obviously, still it's a living document in the sense that there's
Sure.
data is constantly coming in, but definitely exciting to see because I think, like you said, first of all, instead of all the doom and gloom we get from the deaths and destruction and dollar loss and all that stuff, I mean, it's good to see some of the wins documented and see what our brothers across the country are doing successfully, right?
Yeah.
That's huge. And I think also, man, being able to say, hey, this is why we do this, or this is where, we need to focus on this area because, you know, this is what the data is showing us. And, cyano kits are making a big push in the fire service because of data, because of information that's is starting to come available to like, hey, and like you said, I mean, it's not like, oh my God, there's this 80% increase in survivability. But if you get a 20% increase, a 15% increase, again, if that's your loved one, that's that much more chance that they have to walk away. Why not do it?
It goes back to, the cost of investment on a cardiac arrest is quite significant between the medication and the manpower, and that's for a chance. But you'll hear, the expense of a cyno kit and the cost it has to invest in those or keep them. And, at what point, where is that balance? And, if we're willing to do it for one that has, not the greatest opportunity, like why would we not do it for the other that's already struggling and needs assistance? And so, to me, like the Sino kit argument, I think that's, as we're seeing this validation, like now it's starting to be, well, why aren't we purchasing them, or why don't we have them? When if it comes, well, I mean, the same organizations are purchasing Narcan, knowing that there's a high probability that they're going to be used again and again and again on the same people. But you do it because it's not our choice to determine, who lives, who dies, or when we should intervene. And I think cyno kits are, in my mind, the same thing. If we have that opportunity out there and it's best for the patient, and this is me saying EMS, like it's best for the patient, then we should absolutely ensure that we have access to them. And I know that every department can't put them on every ALS unit or have them on every rig, but you start at, whether it's med control or battalion chiefs or somebody has it, and then you start implementing it and rolling it out.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's at the end of the day, man. I would ask, my question to people is always this, you know, we're in the business of giving a chance, right? We're in the business. I think you've said this in your lecture before, man. Like we're in the business of hope, man. That's what we do. We give hope. And it's not our job to sit here and play God and say, yeah, well, they only got a 10% chance to survive. And that's 10%. If that's your wife, that's your kid, that's your brother, your
If
father,
I told
your
you
mother.
you got a 10% chance to win the Mega Millions right now, or the Powerball $1 billion lottery, you're going out and buying 100 tickets because it's 10% chance.
Yeah.
But when it comes to civilians, we're like, it's just, it's kind of low. Well, it's lottery to them, so we're going to absolutely take that opportunity.
Oh yeah, man. It's I tell you, honestly, man, one of the coolest videos that surfaced in the last few years that I feel like really drives home the point of giving everybody a chance. Man, that fire in Fort Walton in 2019, where there's like they literally it's a vacant, there's heavy fire, it's a board up middle of the night, and they show up, and this homeless lady's in there like yelling for help, and they take the plywood off the or the OSB off the window, and it like fire rolls out the window.
Yeah.
And I always love to pause it right there and said, who says she's dead?
Yeah.
For people who haven't seen it. And I can't tell you how many times people, like half the room raises their hand and says she's dead. And then you keep playing the video and she's still screaming for help. And then
Sure.
you show them the after fire pictures of a styrofoam cooler on the floor that didn't melt, that didn't burn, and it's stuff like that, man. Like, you don't know from the outside. The only way, and I think it goes back to really getting that interior size up, right? Getting eyes, if you can make searchable space and get in there and find out really what's going on. That video is super powerful to me, like driving home, like tactically when you're showing search videos. In recent times, it's a recent example of like, hey,
Yeah.
don't be so quick to write people off. Don't be so quick to say, hey, it's a vacant, it's a board up, whatever, middle of the night, no cars in the drive, or whatever. There's so many things that people, I've heard arguments against searching vacants because, well, it's boarded up. Well, how did the fire start? It's
But you
the
carry
whole
a can.
right.
Yeah.
And so like it is funny, the double standard almost, like, we use data for EMS and all this other stuff. And slowly but surely, data's creeping into the fire side. But it's funny because like there's a lot of people still that feel like it's too risky, or we can't do that, or we shouldn't do that. And it's like, to me, it's like, obviously there's a lot of variables there. You got to look at you got to look at obvious the fire conditions. You've got to look at the building condition. There's a lot of things that go into that. But here's the thing, like, we cannot blanketly just write people off because the building's half involved. I hear that all the time. Fully involved, and you get there and there's like half involved.
Yeah.
Or less sometimes. And it's funny because at night, man, that really, I always feel like the numbers of fully involved go up at night.
Or like
Because,
relying on the police officer, right?
Yeah.
He's on scene saying fully involved. You
Yep.
might as well just throw that out the window.
Yep.
They could have light smoke showing, and they're gonna call.
But it's funny, the psychology, like when people hear that on the radio,
everybody goes, well, we had an officer, and she even said, like, I heard fully involved before I even got there, and that was implanted in my mind before I even arrived to the scene. And I'm looking at this building knowing it's not fully involved, but I've heard it on the radio, I've seen it on the MDT, and the first words come out of my mouth are fully involved, and it sets for everybody coming in, and then you're trying to ramp it back up at that point. It's unique, and I just think that hopefully you're starting to see this swing of, can I search it? And if the answer is yes, get in and search it. If the answer is no, like, make it searchable and then get in and search it. And that's really, if you can kind of simplify it down, that's it, right? There's all these variables, and
Sure.
and we know our job has risks. Like, on one end, we're not trying to create this kamikaze mission where, Godspeed, I'm diving in, and whatever happens, happens, right? Like, there's this, we are trying to mitigate risks and put the tides back in our favor. But on the other side, there's that, like, we're not going to take any risks, and that's obviously a bad place to be if you're a civilian trapped in a fire. And if we never, encounter risks on the fire ground, the only time we will encounter it will be the one that we're unprepared to mitigate. So, we absolutely have to mitigate risk and understand it's part of what we encounter, and whether it's hose lines or understanding fire behavior or isolated doors, ventilating, there's all these things that we could also do to push it back into our favor.
I think it comes down to it, man. Control the variables you can control, right? I mean, if we can, to me, the question is there's been a lot of discussion, and you can chime in and weigh in on this, on survivability profiling, and all this stuff gets thrown around. And to me, the question I always try to ask when I go there is not, is it survivable? It's, for me, it's like, is it searchable?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not searchable, can I make it searchable? And those are the two questions, like, I try to answer for myself. But I know that, there's a lot of people that have, put that mindset out there of, like, survivable, or, can anybody survive that, blah, blah, blah. And, I think, well-intentioned in some regards, certainly, like you said, we're not trying to be kamikaze mission. We want to be intelligently aggressive, not just blindly aggressive. But at the same time, I almost think some of the stuff that's come out in the last 10 or 15 years along those lines has almost actually made us timid, or made us write people off too soon, where we're quick to throw from the outside, from an outside size up, to write people off because, well, there's heavy smoke coming out that window, it's too hot in there, or there's fire licking out the top of the window, or whatever. And like I said, that fire in Fort Walton is a perfect case in point, because there's so many things that, you start off with the information that is vacant, it's the middle of the night, it's a board up. Like, how many people automatically start slowing down in their mind right off the bat? And then you go to, oh, there's someone in there, but then the window like lights off and there's vent point ignition with fire rolling out the window, and Paul's it there. Now how many people say she's dead? And it's one of those things, like I said, um, you know, what I would say is there's almost, we've tried to make these field tactician doctorates out here that I could diagnose what's going on in that house right here, which we, to some degree, I get it. There's physics, we can read smoke, we can read fire conditions, but it's, I thought it was interesting with all the technology and all the information that ULFSRI has, and NIST and all these folks doing studies and research and putting all these probes throughout the building and measuring all this stuff. Even they, in the most recent coordinated fire study, came out and said there's too many variables to tell from just strictly from an outside view what's survivable or not. And I think, and I'm paraphrasing, but that's really interesting to me with all the data that they can collect, that even they were like, hey, there's too many variables, there's too many things. And I think like that's all the more reason why when we're talking search, it really is that, can we search it or can we make it searchable? Because we don't know what we don't know from the outside.
Yeah, I think for those who aren't familiar, that the San Diego J Street fire, like that is to me one of the great examples that you could watch on YouTube. You see a firefighter jump in, pull a civilian out. Duration of time goes by, that firefighter sustains thermal injuries, even though he's in proper PPE. He has to bail out. Second firefighter jumps in and he finds a second kid, and it's a substantial 5 minutes, and that second child survives. And if you were to say, based on conditions and the thermal, or the thermal impact in that room, like that kid went out a shot and he survived. And there's another video out of California where there's a teenager that is just burned horribly, and his outlook on life is he talks about the ability to make his mom laugh, and the little things in life that he took for granted. And so those are all kind of the wins of the search, even though people are trying to put us in losing positions. And I think the UL stuff is great. And there was it felt like at some point there was this component of to find how little water was needed to put out as much fire as possible. And even though that's not how we attack, and that I don't want to necessarily find the 1-for-1 net ratio, right? I don't want to be outgunned when I go to that fight. We have seen some of the other stuff, and to your point, the complexity of it. Like, you can't from the outside diagnose, how long they've been in there, what the duration or exposure has been, how high are they, how elevated are they, were they able to get isolated, were they able to get to an area of refuge, what's their fitness level, what's their pre-existing medical conditions look like, are they in good shape, are they obese, do they have diabetes, do they have COPD? There's all these things that go into it. Were they walking and they fell down? Were they crawling the whole time? But we can't analyze that. We just can't. And, the person that tries to from the outside, they'll be looking at a parking lot by the time they figure out what the first decision is going to be. So I'm a dumb firefighter, and to make it as simple as I can for me, in that search aspect is, can I get in there and search it? And if the answer is yes, we'll do so. And if the answer is no, I need to find a hose line to make it searchable. And Chris Gilpin calls it searchable real estate. That's the easiest way that I've been able to understand it, right? Buy and hold searchable real estate with your hose lines, and then occupy that real estate with your search teams.
Yeah, and honestly, man, I think when you look at the data from the Firefighter Rescue Survey, it supports that, right? With 57% of grabs being made by primary search crews and 24% being made by primary fire attack crews. I mean, at the end of the day, that's 81% of all victims being pulled out by those two groups of people. So all the more reason, for getting inside, putting water, on the fire, at least holding the fire in check, right? Establish that attack corridor, and provide the search team the ability to get out and search with confidence, knowing they got the protection of a hose line. Man, those two tactics hand in hand save the most lives, hands down.
I would even say we've really even tailored some of our search stuff to that concept, the data, and some of the studies of, we used to, on a lot of incidents, although the front door is and can be, the quickest way to reach some of these locations. Understanding that the nozzle team is going to, basically occupy the space from the front door to the seat of the fire, and that our search teams are now looking just as much at the spaces that nozzle team is not going to hit, and their responsibility to get to those bedrooms or those locations quicker, while the nozzle team advances forward. So
Yeah, and honestly, man, one of the things I love to do, and we'll do engine classes and stuff, and I purposely, try to make a component of the training and a lot of trainings, finding a victim on the way to the fire with the hose line, because it's amazing how many people never really train for that. Like, what happens if you find a victim? Like, what do you do?
yeah,
And it's funny because I've even had people like, this is supposed to be an engine class. I was like, well, statistically, about a quarter of the time, the engine crew stretching to the fire is going to find a victim.
yeah.
So this is very much a realistic possibility.
Why are we
Uh,
doing engine work?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's funny. And and it's really funny to me because, like, in the suburban setting, especially, man, like, just because you're on an engine doesn't mean you're not doing search or vent. I mean,
Yeah,
like, you got to be able to kind of shift hats or gears and wear many hats. But it is funny, like, how few people actually have even had that conversation of, like, hey, if we find a victim on the way to the fire, what do we do? Like, they go into the drill thinking all I'm doing is stretching a line to the seat of the fire and
yeah.
put water in the fire. And then when you just throw that little variable in there of, like, hey, holy cow, there's a victim. Uh,
Yeah.
it's cool to see the mindset shift of, like, oh shit, we got to do something.
And
And
and one of the things, like Russell Sykes, who's an instructor at the Smoke Diver program, like one of the things he does is, this drill of you're the engine team, and you made it to the seat of the fire, and now what, right? Like the search team hasn't been assigned, especially in some of your smaller departments or suburban or rural areas. Now what? And drop the boat anchor, close the door, and start searching back. But you'll see, guys be like, well, we're not search, we're fire attack. Fire's out. Now what are you supposed to do? Or they'll start dragging this nozzle all the way back through the house, going room to room and just slowing themselves down and killing themselves with effort when it's put the fire out, close the door, drop the boat anchor, and start searching quickly. And if the fire comes back up, you know exactly where the nozzle's at.
well, here's the other thing too, man. I tell people all the time, like, look, if you're still hitting fire, but you've got it under control and confined,
Yeah.
listen, if you got a decent nozzleman that's been on the job for more than 2 days, like, I have zero qualms of, like, hey man, like, hold, you got what you
Hold
got.
the room.
Good. You good. Hold the room or the area, right? Just hold it for a second. Let me peel off and search these 2 rooms real quick. Even though I may not get the whole house searched immediately, if I can, that smaller area that around the hose line on the way to the
Yeah.
fire, if I can search that, who knows? You can clear 30, 35%, 40% of the house before that second crew is able to get in there and start that primary.
Yeah.
You
You
know?
add, hydro vent and clear some of it out from that inside and increase visibility.
Yeah.
Like these are all things that are components of it.
Absolutely. So, real quick, I just want to get your thoughts on,
Uh-oh.
we're talking about search tactics. Um, obviously VES, man, when I first got on the job, VES was like, that's a big city tactic. We don't do that. And then over time, obviously, with more education and training, a lot of smaller rural and suburban departments are finding out, like, hey, this may actually be our best bang for our buck to get in and get these victims out. So that's encouraging, obviously. But there's other things, the oriented search, guys argue against, do we split guys? Do we split search? Do we, just really kind of want to get some of your thoughts. There's the tick assisted, the tick led search. I mean, there's all these different styles of search. So when you're teaching search and you're kind of going through your arsenal of potential, skills or tools that you can use, what are some things that you feel like yield the best bang for your buck when you're searching? Let's say you show up, you got a 3-man crew, and you're tasked with search.
Sure.
What is kind of going through your mind as an officer on the decision? Do we VS? Do we do a split search? Do we do an oriented search? Like, how do you kind of make that decision in your mind of what kind of yields the best bang for your buck? Is it, obviously time of day comes into play, reports, things like that.
I mean, even time of day, we're kind of still gearing towards the bedrooms.
Okay,
When you
sure,
look at
yeah.
some of that firefighter rescue survey data
Yeah.
with the amount of numbers that are going, find them in the bedrooms,
Hmm.
and then the corridors near the bedrooms and the stairwells. That all helps. For me, it's one of those things where, obviously, if I was to search, I think split search. I think we all agree, like split search gives us the ability to occupy the most space with the most
Mhm.
amount of people, and that's kind of as Grant would call it, the varsity standard, and I would agree with him on that. But there's this other understanding that if I'm searching for my crew because you're not necessarily familiar or comfortable doing that more than I'm searching for the victim, then we've gone past our our search parameters. Our ability to search. We need to shrink those parameters down a little bit. Um, Especially as the officer component. If we're doing more than a 2-guy team, so if we have 4, we're splitting them 2 up, 2 down, or 2 are handling maybe VES from the outside, and 2 are interior search, or however we do that. We're still going to necessarily like that oriented search concept. That doesn't mean somebody's just holding a position. I think that's the biggest probably misunderstanding of the oriented search, or at least our philosophy on oriented searches. Oriented search means you're oriented to the egress and the situation, but that doesn't mean you're the one that is stuck like an anchor in the middle and just watching everybody do work, right? Like I can put somebody in a bedroom, whether I have the tick or not, like put them in a bedroom here. I could put guy number 2 in the bedroom across, and I could search some areas too, as long as I'm understanding like how to get out and how, if we find a victim, what that's going to look like. I don't necessarily have to be attached to a doorway, staring while one person is killing themselves with labor, and I'm just watching, crawl. And I think to me, a split search is the goal, but at bare minimum, we should be hitting an oriented search.
So let me ask you a question. If you pull up on a 2-story house or maybe an apartment or something like that, do you kind of in your mind have certain like criteria cutoffs where you say, we're going to VES instead of going up the stairs and trying to split search, or what is going through your mind when you're thinking like, hey, what is your kind of, do you only use VES if you have highly suspected, like, hey, they're in there, or known locations, or because some people say that, right? Only if you know, or there's strong belief, like I think they're in that room.
I think VES, like certainly with VES, it's like diminishing targets. I think that's one that we need to talk about, right? Diminishing targets, egress pass cutoff, or like we got to go right now, And there's also like VES doesn't always have to be the second story. But our term would be like a ladder assisted search. That's always the goal, is on those second floors. Is although we might VES, like VES for us is a target location search. Like we're VES in second floor Charlie side, like we're hitting that room for our organization and our vernacular. So we're hitting that room. We're going to search that, and then conditions dictate, and most of the time conditions may change while you initiate that VES. So you may have water on the fire. Hopefully, your ventilation's happening. And then we're transitioning what we call ladder assisted search. We're getting, the rest of the crew in there, and we're pushing to the other. And now we're transitioning more to that split search or oriented search. Because at the end of the day, like now we do have two means of egress. We have the ladder we brought with us. We have the stairwell on the inside. And then we have outside crews that create more egress if we need them to. I always look at, is the fire level 1, and so if it's at floor 1, what does it look like? What does the engine team's advancement look like? Do it looks like, by the time we're pulling up, are they making a push? Or are they still flaking it out in the yard? And if it's conditions that we may be ahead or above the hose line for a second, like I'll probably err on the VES with higher probability areas or good target locations, just because I can get in, isolate, buy some time there for a second. And, that also gives that engine team the ability to push forward. But if the engine company's already inside, I'm not necessarily as inclined to throw a 28-foot ladder and start taking a window and buy some of that time up too. So those are some things we look at. Like on a 1-story, although we might call it VES for the target, 1-story ranch, and where your bedrooms are, like why not just start there and save that time entirely? They're all dynamic, and you kind of have to judge the conditions of what you're going to. Even apartments, some may call it a VES, but if a breezeway is involved, it just may be creating your own access point to a Charlie side or another window. Even if you're throwing it to a sliding glass porch window, or porch door, you're going through that way. So VES to us is essentially a target location search, but that doesn't mean like ladder assisted searches or just using ladders for additional access points. Like that should be included in that table as well. It's really about access. If it's going to be quicker for you to access those locations through the interior, through the stairwell, or whatever it may be, then we'll do it, because there's also the opportunity you're going to find that civilian in that interior corridor from the second to the first floor. But if the conditions don't warrant it, the nozzle hasn't made it to see the fire, the attack team is not there, or you might be the second search team, and you're hitting the location while the search is hitting some other bedrooms or other locations, like we'll add that too. And had several successful incidents where, like, confirmed victim entrapment, unknown location, nozzle teams going forward, and you just see 2 or 3 VES teams like starting at bedrooms and then working their way through there.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, honestly, man, like, getting away from, that's two things. One being, what's the quickest, most direct route to them, and it may be like you said. I mean, if the nozzle team's making headway on the fire, and you can make the stairs quickly and run right up the stairs to be in a bedroom, like, maybe that is the fastest way. And I love the mindset with that because, I think that sometimes there's a misconception that, oh, there's, someone's trapped upstairs. We're not sure exactly where, but we have to go. Some people almost like, you got to VS, you got to VS. Well, maybe,
Yeah,
it really is dependent on your access. I mean, if I have a room that I can directly hit the stairs and have them right there, I mean, maybe, and that's the other thing too. Just because you enter on the first floor, hopefully you got people paying attention, throwing ladders, things like that. Hey, you don't have to necessarily remove them all the way out the bedroom, down the stairs, and out the front door. Maybe that, you went up the stairs, you find them. Hey, throw me a ladder over here. We're going to take them down the ladder. I mean, there's so many. I guess, like, what I take away from that is, I mean, use your head, right? Think about
yeah,
the quickest way to get there, but also the best way to remove them from that environment. You talked about the 9 and 21, right? The 921. Yeah. What's the best way to get them oxygen to get them in a normal atmosphere again, out of that threat? Maybe it's closing the door, isolating that room, and removing them out a window. Um,
yeah.
but
And we talk about, and that's something we've instilled in the recruit school environment is like immediate 60 seconds, long term. So what do you do right now for the civilian once you find them? What do you do over the next 60 seconds, and what's your long term plan? And sometimes it's immediate is the same as 60 seconds of just drag them back out the door you found them or that you came in. And sometimes it might be pull them in the door, close the room, and isolate, and then take the window and hang their head out of it. And then the long term plan is get a ladder that Charlie's side or somebody hops out. Like that fire they had the other day. They found a civilian, and one guy hops out the window, the other drags it to the window, and they're throwing them out through that front outside window. So while the other side on the Delta, they're VESing, and they have 2 in a very tiny bedroom in their bathroom, and they're trying to get her out of an elevated window with 2 ladders on the outside. So these have to be dynamic, and it's really one thing why we drill in our recruit school environment, like the decision making process, and encouraging them to take ownership of that operation. Is you may be the probie, but if your hands on the victim and you're one room removed from the officer, like you're going to have to make some decisions as well. Where you may be, one year on the job, but you're the medic on the rescue, and the other firefighter is a medic probie, and you're having to make some of those decisions. So that's why we push those dynamic situations. But that no matter what, you really the one thing we have to avoid is that like stagnation, and paralysis by analysis. We're just sitting there. What are we supposed to do? Like we have to do something.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's it. I mean, action is going to give you results. And here's the beautiful thing, and I think Jay Bonifield talks about this quite a bit in his anatomy of push class. Is basically, our action, by taking action, we're going to receive feedback. We're going to receive feedback either what we're doing is working or what we're doing is not working. But if you do nothing, you're not going to get any feedback, and you can sit there. It's that whole a good plan executed violently is better than a perfect plan executed a week from now kind of thing. It's the whole mindset of like, take as much information as you can, but make a decision and start down that path. And if you need to redirect, by all means do so. But having the ability to act, and then to process the information constantly, size up what you're doing, and find what's best for them. So I got 2 things.
We actually, real quick, I'm sorry, but
Yeah,
we
no,
have
go ahead.
in our officer development program, that's, we call it the hierarchy of decision making. And obviously, like the perfect decision is the goal, a good decision's next, a bad decision's, below that, because hopefully you realize like you made the bad decision, then you adjust course and fix it. And the worst thing we can do is no decision, because we're not identifying what works or what doesn't work.
Yeah.
That's really how we see it.
I love it, man. And that is, I mean, I agree. Make a decision, and like I said, hopefully, like you said, if it isn't the right decision, you are smart enough to realize, hey, this is not the best course of action. Let's do something different. But like
Yeah.
sitting there with twiddling your thumbs, wondering what you should do, every second that's ticking by is time the fire's growing. It's time that victims are being exposed and insulted by fire and smoke, and it's not going to be good for them. It's not going to be good for us if we sit here and do nothing. So
Yeah.
I wanted to get your thoughts on 2 things. One, obviously you're a truck boss now, but your philosophy from the engine, like when you're pulling up on an engine company, obviously you want to put the fire out. That's one of the best things we can do is, really when we're talking search and rescue, I mean, engine search is a big thing now. I mean, it's getting pushed, more and more guys pushing like, hey, pay attention to what's going on around the line, have a plan if you find a victim. But the other thing is too, is, we can remove the victim from the threat, or we can remove the threat from the victim kind of thing. It's that whole, big picture of, hey, sometimes, the best thing we can do is put the fire out. Sometimes the best thing we can do on an engine is put the fire out and then search back off the line, things like that. But I want to know, like, as an officer, having rode on both the engine and the truck, when you're thinking, the life safety thing, when you're thinking, hey, I want to get these people out of here. I want to create, some space for these people to buy them time, create that chance. Your mindset as a big search guy on the engine company when you're pulling up. Obviously, you're a little bit of a philosophical shift in the sense of, typically the engine is going to go put water on the fire. That's kind of the usual bread and butter objective. But how do you kind of, in your mind, still keep that search mindset from the engine officer role and from the engine company role, and really integrate that kind of culture and mindset from the engine? Because here's the thing, like, I think you guys just not too long ago had an engine company made a grab. I think I watched the video on not too long ago, a couple months maybe.
That was actually the truck company that one guy grabbed a nozzle and made a solo push while the other members of the truck are making the VS, So
I got you.
They understand the importance of it.
Sure.
Poor guy, he was in the hospital for 3 weeks. He grabbed the nozzle, his hands started swelling. He had hives all over the place. That truck dude was screwed.
He probably had to call EMS too, didn't he?
Oh, he was sick. Sick to his stomach. Now everyone saw the push and they're like, "Bad news, man. You're on an engine.
You're on an engine for the rest of your career." I mean, I'm a firm believer that deep down inside, every truckie secretly wants to be on the engine, but they just don't want to admit it.
I believe that you can't be a truck. You can't be on a truck if you don't understand engine work, and that's one of the nice things about our organization is we all start on engines before we move to truck ops, and how my operations that I do as a truck member, whether it's ventilation or forcible entry or search, and how those operations affect that fire ground. If I don't understand what the nozzle's doing, what the interior teams are doing, and I don't understand what's going on inside of fire, some of the operations I'm doing from outside the fire, like, I'm not going to understand completely. So I think engine work is obviously important, and that's the backbone of the American Fire Service. It just unfortunately means that in most of our organizations, engines are first out on medical calls, and that's where I think the bad taste in the mouth of riding the engine has come for a lot of us. I think that when we talk engine work, I would also say a majority of the fire service doesn't necessarily have the luxury of doing engine work and truck work or dedicated truck companies. So it's almost like if we called it engine work and support work, like that's more realistic in the response packages that we see across the nation. For us, it is still kind of easy to keep that mindset of the search because a lot of our operations are driven by, in our first 2 assignments, our goal is to get attack and search. Really attack, search, and water supply. If we can get those 3 things done with the first 2 companies, we feel really good about that operation and how it's going to go. So if that's 2 engine companies, the second engine company is going to search no matter what. For us, or for me, it starts obviously with that good size up, good, walk around. And that really things we're looking for is location, extent of fire, and trying to match the attack package to what we're about to do. And then looking for any immediate civilian life threats or targets of opportunity that'll diminish prior to me getting water on the fire. Like those are things that I'm concerned with. And any other like immediate hazards that need to be communicated or they're going to sway our operation, to the negative. So those were the big 3 things on my walk around and my size up that I was trying to identify as a first and officer when I was riding on that engine company. And then from there, if you're going to be solo or you're going to be there for a minute, like the goal is to basically get the line in position that it can extinguish and hold the fire with 1 firefighter on that nozzle while the search team continues. But if we're not, we want to make that good aggressive push and even communicate some things to the next in company. And in our system, like we can lay that foundation. So, it might be, engines on scene, we're stretching line fire control and, where we're going. And then laying out next in engine, next in company, I need you to grab water and get a search going. Or next engine, you're going to be search. So you can still lay that foundation of trying to get search up in that priority, even if you're not necessarily the one that's initiating it. And I think a lot of times now we're starting to see like those second companies already looking to get after search. It's obviously easier if it's like a two-man rescue or heavier the truck companies because that's just what they're going to do. But even that second engine, drop your people, lay out, and start getting search going for us.
Yeah, I think like it, I think that's where the debate, you get this debate. I actually just had this conversation with a group of students this past weekend. Of you pull up and you're the first due engine, right? And you've got a 2-story house, fires on the first floor, Charlie side, first floor, and you've got report of victims.
Yeah,
Um, you know, what are you doing first? And it is amazing the amount of people, like, a lot of people say, hey, go put the fire out. If you don't know where they're at, like, go put the fire out. You don't know where they're at, how many, like, the best thing you can do is go neutralize the threat, put the fire out. And then you throw in there, well, okay, now you pull up and there's someone on a balcony screaming for help, and the fire is in that same spot, or
sure.
maybe on the alpha side near the stairs. I mean, again, what do you do? And well, I'm going to go for the rescue. In the whole debate on the first engine, do you go for the rescue or do you go for attack? And I think there's a lot of variables, right? There's a lot of things that come into play there, because do we know that that's the only victim? Do we know that that's the most severely, that may not be the most severely threatened victim? Do we know, do we know that where our next two companies coming from? Because here's the thing too, if I got hands on a window, a soot stained window, you know, uh, can I do two things at once? Because can my driver take a window and do a quick VES while we're stretching a line and getting a line in service? Can I have a firefighter apply water while we make a rescue? I mean, there's
Yeah,
so many variables, and it really is amazing though, because people get in this mindset. Life safety, incident stabilization, property conservation. We've all heard it. We've all been there. But well, if there's a rescue, you got to go to rescue mode. And I say not necessarily. I think really it depends on the situation. And can we do two things at once? Sometimes if we're not sure, maybe the best thing we can do is a size up and say, because here's the other thing. So I brought up that scenario. I said, okay, you got someone on the balcony screaming, they're frantic, help me, help me, help me. Fire on the Charlie side, first floor. Officer does a 360. They're, oh, we're going for rescue. We're going for the rescue. I said, okay. Now the officer is doing a 360 and there's 3 people screaming for help, and the fire is literally licking up, right up the first floor to the second floor, right there, cutting them off. Now, who's the most exposed victim? Who's the most severely exposed? That's what I bring that up to say this. It's easy to say, well, if you pull up on the engine and there's a rescue to be made, you go to rescue mode and that's what you do. But I think it's a lot more dynamic than that. I think there's a lot more variables, and I just want to get your thoughts on that, because I think it's easy to say, oh, well, if there's a rescue, you go for the rescue. But I don't know that it's necessarily that simple. I think there's times where the best thing you can do is to go put the fire out and do a thorough size up. And I don't know, man. Like I understand the idea of, like, I don't want to leave someone hanging out on a balcony by themselves. I also don't want to, focus on that one person and miss the other 2 or 3 people that are really in a bad spot even closer. Then you bring up the whole, like, apartment complex, and you got people screaming from all over the place. Who do you go
yeah,
get first, right? And so like when you're prioritizing things, I think as an engine, it's easy to muddy the water and say, well, I'm going to rescue mode, I'm defaulting fire attack. Well, what if your second due's delayed?
yeah.
What if
I
you
mean, there's certainly the what if game can create all these variables, and I think that's actually an important component of fire service, like the what if game at the kitchen table, because we'll go out and try it on the fire ground and see on the at the drill yard if it's going to work or if it doesn't. I would say a majority of our fires we're going to stretch a line as the first and engine company,
Mhm.
and plan A is pretty much always going to be stretch that line, but the second option is going to be go in rescue mode. But there is this third component that I need to be able to apply water and initiate rescue mode at the same time, and you have to
Mhm.
have a plan, whether it's the engineer's the one or whether it's the firefighter stretches the line, and John Wayne's it because they have to based on that incident, or there's all these things that go with it. For us, there's pretty the only time we would really see, and we've had a couple fires where that first in unit goes rescue mode, is like confirmed location and that target is diminishing right now, and it's an opportunity that we have to take. But we do have terminology in our response that talks about that. If I was to say rescue mode, and really in our battalion, something pretty heavily drilled. If if I say rescue mode is that first in, that second in engine is anticipating that they're essentially moving up in their order of operations, and they're going to be the attack pumper, and they're going to stretch the line, and they should just anticipate they're all in to make sure we remove that confusion of like, well, is the driver at the rig pumping, or are they all in helping with that rescue, or how's that looking? We even have that operation kind of ingrained at us that a second doing a rescue mode should just anticipate acting like they're the first in engine, and it will be an all-out blitz to support that rescue mode operation. I don't think you can necessarily say, if this percentage of fire is involved, you stretch a line, or if this victim is in this position, you're going to go for a rescue mode. Sometimes you have to see what you have and make, based off conditions, construction, civilians, information, and your crew's capabilities and the staffing and the response model. You just have to go with it. And in a lot of these departments where it may be 8 to 10 minutes for that second arriving unit, like it still may be just a quick advancement of the line. It's not going to be the prettiest, and it's not going to be full extinguishment. Let's get us in a position where a single person can hold this fire while we're starting to search. And then, we can support them as need be. And that also gives the opportunity that somebody can communicate like, hey, I can't hold this anymore. And our plans can change. But you have to be adaptable, but you have to have kind of really those three major components in your initial on-scene arrival plan of, what happens when we stretch the line, what happens when we go rescue mode, and what about that case, like our company 7 encountered the other day, if I have to stretch a line and initiate rescue mode off the same apparatus.
Yeah, 100%. I just always curious to get people's mindset on that, because it is funny. Like when you talk scenarios, and in theory, when you throw it out there, oh, you got someone hanging out a window, it's automatically, it's or my baby's in that window. It's easy to just automatically say default, like, yes, this is what we do every time. And I think, like you said,
I will say, if somebody's on scene and they're pointing to a window and they're like, my loved one is in that window, we're going for VES.
Sure. I think, committing a member for VES, at a minimum. But yeah, I love what you said about being able to kind of maybe try to at least put water in a position to hold, to buy time for that search or that rescue.
Yeah.
I love that. I love, splitting your personnel if you need to apply water and try to remove that person if possible. But also knowing like, hey, it does change, because if it's an 80-pound old lady hanging out the window, that's a little different than a 500-pound unconscious patient in the back of a bedroom. And I think like that's just where you just got to have to use your judgment, like you said. And
the fat ones are never downstairs. Never.
No, never.
It's always Gilbert the Grape upstairs.
It's just the way it is, man. It's but I love the debate with the engine stuff, because I agree. If I got a confirmed victim location, especially if I know my second deuce fairly close behind, to me, like that's hey, let's go get this person.
And I even think,
but as an officer too, I'm still going to do a quick 360 to make sure that we're not missing something, either fire conditions or other victims. But you do have to you try to do the most good for the most people, and sometimes that means pulling that person out. Sometimes that means, hey, we got too many people for our 3 guys to handle right now, and our second deuce delayed. Let's get some water here, and then let's put somebody on this nozzle, and let's go. Let's start pulling people out windows and stuff, and do what we got to do. But it is very much a you've got to pick that that call. If you call in rescue mode, commit to it. That's fine. Just understand, the fire's still growing. If you go to rescue mode and that's the route you go, it's that much more important, I think, to isolate. If you're in bedrooms, things like that, if you can isolate those rooms, to give yourself some time, give the victim some time, and I think about the line of duty death in Iowa a number of years ago, where the 3 firemen went up to get the kids upstairs, and no one even put fire out on the first floor, and they end up getting cut off, and in those things, I mean, you really have to understand the dynamics. For every minute that we're not applying water, if there is a delay on the second due, like what happened to that fire, there's potential, the risk goes up astronomically.
Yeah.
And I think like that's what we just have to weigh is like, hey, can we do the search and get it done quickly and still get back and and hold this fire in check. And here's the thing, if we pull the people out and the fire's gone, Like at that point, like, our job first and foremost is obviously life safety of those people we sort of protect. So let's not mix words there on that. I think that's anybody would agree that if we save the lives and lose the building, everybody's gonna feel okay with that. Like, hey, we did our job. But at the same token, I think the Andy Fredericks said it, about the open nozzle is essentially probably one of the biggest life saving piece of equipment we have on any of our rigs, and there's a lot of truth to that too. And just picking your poison on whatever you're going to do, make that decision, but do it aggressively. And if you can, split your crew and you can utilize people in multiple places and cover multiple grounds and tasks, especially in the suburban setting, man. Like you've got to, that's why we
a
have training.
difficult thing, I think, for me or for, and the responsibility of us as an instructor too is, in my response model, I'm going to have most likely at least another unit, if not 2 or 3 more units on scene before I've completed my walk around, or that line is getting charged. But somebody else doesn't necessarily have that same luxury. So, when people ask what should I do in these situations? Well, in ours we do have the plan for that delayed unit coming in, particularly in like our northern or western areas of the county where it's a little bit more spread out. But for us, I we have a plan, but the opportunity or the odds of me or an officer doing a walk around and completing that and stretching the line and charging it before a second unit gets on seat is very slim. So you can almost set that paradigm that you don't have to choose between attack and search because they're both going to get handled. But I still would say you probably tend to err on the side of water on the fire, unless like confirmed victim location or a target that you just have to hit now, or you won't even have the opportunity to. And I would even say, like, if you look at Paulding County, which is one county to the west of us, they had a civilian rescue where they stretched the line initially, and the officer made a fantastic call. Like, we're not getting the knockdown we anticipated, and they just went straight to the window, and VES from that point ended up pulling 2 out because the water on the fire wasn't working. And rather than try and hit that square peg in that round hole, they were screw it, we're going to have to hit the target of opportunity right now.
Yeah, I think that just emphasizes the importance of training, man. Always being ready, thinking that you're gonna have victims, and being flexible enough to not be so like, oh, I have to do this or I have to do that. Like, ultimately the scene is gonna, in a lot of ways, the scene is gonna dictate, like, your resource pool, your training, the scene, all these things, all these variables, right, come into play. Our job is to control as many variables as we can, right, and to train for the possibilities that we may run into. Obviously, we train for the most likely scenarios, but I think also having the ability to think critically and kind of call that audible if need be is important as well. And I think that's what strong SOGs and strong, a strong foundation do for us, right? If we have a solid foundation, it's a lot easier to adapt and call audibles if you have the original play down pat. Like, people are really,
they
squared
understand
away.
what's not being accomplished, and they realize it's their turn to step up and handle that.
Well, exactly. When people know, if I can see that there's a need that hasn't been filled for whatever reason, that's when creativity and a little bit of flexibility comes in. But man, it's been a heck of a conversation. Really, really enjoyed it. Obviously, I could stay here all night with you and talk search stuff. It's a lot of great information. There's a ton of info out there. I think as a whole, the service is little by little that drum's being beat, right? And more guys are taking note and starting to kind of echo some of that information from Firefighter Rescue Survey and some of these classes and conferences, and just the remembering why we're here, right? Remembering our purpose, and it's creating good conversations, and and I think, like, at the end of the day, man, for anybody listening to this, hopefully people go back and look for opportunities to improve in their organization, whatever that is, from a big or small organization, doesn't matter. Wherever you are, when you show up on scene, you may be it. And it may be, and you don't know when that fire is going to happen, where it's your opportunity, your Super Bowl, if you will, to make that impact and that difference. And that's where, again, training, educating yourself, learning, educating your people, investing in your people comes into play, right? I mean, you can never, to me, like, if you're on this job, and I think we share a lot of the same sentiments in the fact of, like, a lot of what we do is preparation. I mean, when you think about how much we do, most of our activities are really spent preparing for those small percentage in the grand scheme of things, a small percentage of time that we spend on the fire ground actually doing this stuff. Some more than others, but at the end of the day, like for most fire departments, 95% of what we do is what we consider routine. It's going through the motions, it's training, it's preparing, and you kind of have to almost embrace that process. You almost have to embrace, the getting in a mindset of like, hey, you know what? I'm okay with the grind. I'm okay with, we may go months, without a fire even, or we may go years before we get to make a grab, or, we may not be first due on an engine, making the push, for weeks, months at a time. Sometimes maybe we're playing backup roles or doing all this other stuff. We're going to smells and bells or, whatever, but we're still going to prepare the same way. We're still going to condition for that, for those opportunities when they'll get those small opportunities to make a difference. And I think like that's the beauty of like when you talk about mindset and the philosophy that we approach the job. Like you can't always be looking for sexy. If you're looking for sexy, you will fizzle out in this line of work so quick because there's so much of what we do is just work. It's just work behind the scenes. And whether it's search, whether it's fire attack, whatever it is, if you want to be a good fireman, right, you gotta study, you gotta learn, you gotta grow, you gotta challenge each other, and even when it sucks, even when you're tired, you just gotta continue to press forward a little bit at a time. And that's my soapbox, man. I think that we're just we're in a spot in the fire service where we're seeing more and more guys pushing that message out there, and hopefully more and more guys are starting to take note of it. But I mean, like to me, that is one of the most encouraging things about the fire service in the last few years is it does seem like more and more people are kind of waking up and asking questions and kind of getting back. There's a big push, like the counterculture, if you will, to get back to why we exist to begin with, and that is saving lives and property from fire.
Yeah, and I would even say like it's the responsibility of the instructor that as this information is being put out to tell people that take everything I say as total bullshit, and then go back and try and prove us wrong. And if you do prove us wrong, like you found a better way, you drilled on it, you found a better way, and I want to hear about it because you were able to accomplish a better task or tactic or a more efficient way. But if if what we say ends out to hold true, like you just drilled on it for hours and hours and hours trying to find the best way, and you ended up getting better at it. So I think it's important as don't go to a class or don't go to an instructor and just be like their words of gospel. Like go try and disprove it entirely, and you're either going to find the best way or you're going to make yourself better and cement those skills.
Yeah, 100%, man. So, man, thanks for coming on the show, dude. Thanks for, I always love the passion, love the knowledge,
Yeah, buddy.
The commitment to the job, man. And really, I'll say this, I love the fact that you keep it real. You keep it real, man. And that, you're not, we can sit there, it's easy to, you can throw all sorts of stuff out there back and forth, but at the end of the day, like, I mean, I've always admired the fact that you keep it real. It's a blue collar job. You treat it, you take the job serious, but not, not yourself serious kind of thing. Like it's, you're not afraid to ask why. You're not afraid to question why or how we do things. And I think we need, guys that do that, right? You got to have guys that get in there and realize like, hey, the answer is work. The answer is just putting in the work, and it is sweat equity, man. It is.
I think there's a little bit of that punk rock teenager thing in all of us that makes good firefighters. What we're doing essentially is questioning authority. Like we shouldn't be running into buildings, and we shouldn't be taking some of these risks. Like if you were to look at human nature, but there's got to be that like anti-establishment belief that like, nah, we're going to do it anyway. Screw it, And I think not only that, like when we're prepared and when we are ready and trained up, like not to get on that, the mental health diving board, but I certainly have seen it where like if guys were ready, prepared, and they gave everything they got, and a situation or an incident didn't necessarily go in their favor, they sleep a lot better at night and they feel a lot better knowing like, hey, we were ready. Sometimes it goes against us, but we gave that person every shot we can. And that typically is where you see some of the better outcomes for both the firefighter and the civilian is the prepared individual.
Well, growth, that's the thing. growth comes when we step out of our comfort zone, when we challenge our core, beliefs and systems. And I think all of us need to do that from time
Somebody's
to time.
been reading too many Simon Sinek books over here.
Dude, I'm telling you, man. Listen, I've been.
This is growth, and I'd like to talk about empowerment and dichotomy and
listen,
Jocko.
I tell you, hey, you know what I've been on lately, man, is Andy Frisella, the Real AF podcast.
Mhm.
He's I like it, man. He's got some, some stuff I agree, some things I don't, but I love his willingness to challenge like status quo, willingness to kind of just be raw, real, like in your face a little bit. Like to me, I dig it because, and he's not a fireman. He's not a fireman at all.
I really genuinely don't listen to many fire service podcasts, if any, like if it's a friend or occasionally. Just because like I do want to get outside perspectives, and I want to like see all these different things that I feel like I do dedicate a good bit to the job. And the last thing when I'm driving home and driving to work is like another hour and a half of it on each end of the spectrum. So I mean, I think that expanding your knowledge is important, and that's where like trying to get some outside perspectives of how other people do things, that to me is important as well. Like I think I'm reading I just started reading the Alexander the Great book, trying to figure out how this 32-year-old conquered the world, and here I am like trying to figure out
how to conquer the new crib you're putting together here. So.
Like cursing out IKEA, and this dude's taking over half the world.
Yeah, no, it is impressive, man. I'm actually reading a book about the American Revolution right now. I'm a big history buff. I love history, but just man, some of the shit that they overcame, and like just hearing the stories of guys that obscure dudes that like people have forgotten about, and the stuff that they laid on the line to make little things that went their way that
but their philosophy, why did they do that?
Right.
What steps did they take that made it successful? And just that stuff translates to me as important as fire service podcasts are, or fire service books. Like, and I read a good bit. I read a good bit of fire service books. I try and gain those outside perspectives as well, because if you're like that punk rock philosophy, like progress is never in the history of American, or in the history of humans, really, like no progress has ever come without challenging the status quo. So it's important for us to try and push that as well.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. I think it's about balance. Life in general, we have to be willing to step outside of our circle and comfort zone sometimes to learn and grow. And I think like it's funny, man, you bring that up, because I was talking to Fields not too long ago about this, and a lot of the Nozzle Force stuff came from wrestling and stuff like that. Like it wasn't like a fire service book that led to a lot of the philosophies. And
it's judo, right? Was he like a judo? I can't remember if he talked about it.
Yeah, it was wrestling and like like martial arts.
Tells a story.
Yeah. So, but
that dude, you want to talk about punk rock? It's that.
Yeah. He's I love it though, because it's like it is cool to see like learning from other disciplines and being able to associate that to what we do is really cool. So I know we've been at it for a couple hours now. Are you ready to wrap this thing up with rapid fire?
Yes, let's do it.
So
sweating
there. Well, I mean, you are in your garage in Georgia in July, so
it was bath time, and my daughter wasn't going to give me some quiet. So
no, I feel that my kids my wife's trying to hold them at bay right now between the kids and the dog. So, yeah, man. So rapid fire, 6 questions, raw, honest answers. We haven't gone over this, so this is just your best answer for these questions. So we will send it six questions. As we say, 60 seconds. If it takes more or less, we take what you need, man. So
a little less on this one. We're gonna, if you're betting at home, bet the under.
All right, here we go. Rapid fire question number 1. What is your favorite position in the fire service? And I say position from the standpoint of rank and company assignment.
For me, it was lieutenant on the engine. Like I love my spot on the truck. I love being a captain. It's awesome. For us, like captains also act as battalion chiefs when the battalion's off. But to me, I felt like the lieutenant was the best position. Like day in, day out, you and your guys, like developing them, getting after it. Like you weren't detailed anywhere else. Like you just rolled your company with your people, and you would get your probationary firefighter on the engine company, and you would see the growth, and you would see the progress, and it was just the most fun. Like you got to be right there with them. When you did go to a working fire, you're right there with your people. Like there was no worry that you were going to be stuck in a command role or not necessarily be in the gravy. Like you were next to your nozzleman and you were getting after it. You were getting dirty. You were pulling ceiling. You were searching. And so I really felt like and at least in my department, like lieutenant is the best, and the ability to develop, the ability to recruit, and the ability to refine, and the ability to not have to necessarily act out of position. That was the best.
Yeah, I definitely can see that for sure, man. So this kind of piggybacks on that question. Question number 2: if you have to pick one job on the fire ground, if you get to pick, where do you want to be? If you're getting one task assigned to you coming in on a fire, what is it for you?
Oh, rehab. Duh. No, I mean, obviously, like search would be it, but I guess I would say like right now, it would be in a ventilation component, like especially with the truck, like that ability to kind of diagnose and identify and work with the component, assisting and trying to give the ability for that lift and the relief of the individuals inside. But I do enjoy like roof operations and some of the mystery that comes with them, whether it's residential or commercial. Like so, I think that part right now is fun because it's certainly a challenging task if you're trying to like really understand all components of it. And then through that, I've learned how little I truly understand about construction when you see some of the experts out there and what they're able to do and how they understand it. So right now, I would say being the officer on a truck company that's going to the roof, but in that top 3 would be nozzleman, first head through the window. But I just think it's been fun right now trying to get that down.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty fair. I mean, you're on the truck, so someone's got to keep an eye on those engine guys down below and admire their work. And let's be honest, nobody spends more time in rehab than the truck company. So
it's great, man. Great.
just kidding. Talking shit.
It doesn't bother me.
I know it doesn't.
I'll be cool and comfortable, and you can be making fun of all you want, but I'll be fucking drinking water.
Oh man, it's the tears of the truck company. Oh man. All right. So question number 3. Here we go. This one is answer this however you want. I'm always just curious though. We all have people that mentors and people that build us, people that invest in us. And I think back of numerous people in my career that have helped me. But if you had to kind of, name 1, 2, maybe 3 people, like I said, you answer this how you want to, but people or a person who's had the biggest impact and influence in your professional career, life, what have you, who would that be for you?
I'm gonna give you 3, and we'll try and knock it out quick for each one, right? So one would be, best lieutenant I ever worked for was Andy Rustin, and shout out to him. I mean, that guy was so knowledgeable, so calm, collected, years and years on the job, and I don't know if he ever necessarily got the credit he deserved, but if you were to say, as a department, the impact he had, it was remarkable. So I learned pretty much, a large component of my strategy and tactics was through the exposure with him from inside the department before I started branching out. And he was also one of those guys that like you just felt like you didn't want to let him down. And I think that's always like that, like disappointed dad component of a good officer. Of they're compassionate where they need to be, they're pushing when they need to be, they're honest at all times. But it was almost like you were more worried to let him down than you were, to get in trouble. So the most I learned about leadership was Kevin Lewis. He was a big influence on me. He was, he ran the search program before I did. But he also was my truck boss when I was a Tillerman. And I mean, I learned tremendous amounts of leadership, and he opens my eyes. And it's almost this like Socratic method of questioning that he uses to try and like expand your thought and make you realize how little you truly know. And so he's a phenomenal mentor, and I would even say one of the bigger impacts. The third one would be Dan McGraw, and just a grinder. I had him as an engineer. Now he's my lieutenant. Since I moved over to the truck, he became, and like the ability to work alongside somebody and see, what works for developing officers and what worked to kind of help him get in a position of success. And now, like, that grab you talked about several months ago when the truck pulled up, that was him. He was riding up on the truck that day, and I was off, and you couldn't be a more proud papa to watch your crew just crush it and know that, like, if you were on scene, it probably would have went worse. So, to see both, two superiors and one guy that, worked alongside and below, or he's worked below me, like, those are the big things. And to even learn, like, how officer development's gone right and what I've done wrong and trying to refine that.
Well said, man. Yeah, I like that. I like that you kind of get, you talk about, a lot of people always like, mentors, guys they worked underneath and stuff. I love the fact that you bring up, your brother there, Lieutenant, you said Dan, right? Dan's his name. So Dan, learning from him and his experiences and being able to be part of that, man, that is super cool that you bring that up, because I think that, people think when you're an officer that you got to have all the answers and that you got to,
no. I'll say, right, Dan's kept me out of more trouble than anybody else. And, there's a lot of times I'll be like, I think we should do this. And it's just, you see this head shake and like, I don't think that's a good idea, boss, And, he's older, he's more mature, he's more set in his ways. And he's been tremendous impact.
Awesome, man. Yeah. So
he's my moral compass.
There you go. Yeah, we all need one, man. So question number 4, what do you feel is the biggest challenge facing the fire service today?
There's a lot of them. Superficially, I think you just start with this shift. I would just say in the Southeast, the shift from pensions to defined contributions, and that's hurt it. But the grand scheme is the recruitment and retention part of the fire service. We don't do a good enough job of trying to tell people or teach people like how great the fire service is and how it does more than just teach you to put out fires and help people. Like, it made me a man. I learned about everything from building construction to changing brakes to life skills that I'm able to provide for my family. Like, it gave me every opportunity in the world. And without the fire service, I certainly wouldn't be where I'm at today. But this concept, if you were to say or ask every Fortune 500 company or successful entity out there, like, how do you get the best people? And it's, you actively recruit for the best people. And I think that's one thing that the fire service in a new generation with the, different needs is, we still kind of fall back to the civil service concept of like, just the best people are going to apply and we'll pick them out from there. Like, how do we crack that paradigm to go out and get people and get the best ones and recruit our future of the organization versus, and it's more than social media posts, and it's more than, posters and sign-on bonuses. But how do we actively get out there and, identify what the good components are of a good firefighter, quantify that, and then go out and get them. And I think as times have changed, like, our strategies to find people need to be better. And I think that's one thing the American Fire Service hasn't caught up with is headhunting in the way that other places do.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think it's definitely not an isolated thing to any one part of the country. I mean, a lot of departments across the nation are trying to tackle and grapple the recruitment and retention woes. And I think, like you said, I mean, we got to start looking at ways that, hey, how do we bring people in that are going in the same direction as us, that they want to, that are trying to build a better, trying to build a better future, a better culture, whatever it is. Going out, and I just had this conversation the other day, and I think, like, it's amazing. Like, you go around talking to people, how poorly, in a lot of ways, we kind of had this mindset for years and years and years. I know when I first came on the job, it's probably the same way for you. Is like, just be lucky you're here, kid. and almost like we did a really poor job of selling ourselves, and we just kind of like expected people to show up and groves to our door and grovel at our feet to get in, and I don't think that we live. The times have definitely changed. I mean, the job market and the outlook on the job has definitely shifted, I think, a little bit. And
Well, I think, like, first, I mean, we are lucky to be here in our positions.
we
I'm
are.
certainly very lucky. I think there was, for some reason, this like paradigm shift of, or the sell that we were doing, that like, hey, one of the benefits of the fire service is you could work more, and hey, every firefighter's got a second job, and it's all these things where it's like, if I'm a 20-year-old kid, you're like, whoa, like, I'm gonna work 56 hours a week more rather than 40, and then like your selling point is I can work somewhere else because I need to make more money. Like, and I think
Yeah.
flipping that back to it used to be hey, it's a career and you have light at the end of the tunnel, and there's all these things that come with it. And sure, if you have a different trade, you can utilize that to your advantage. But with a more educated workforces and evolving workforces and a job market the way it is, you could walked out one day and get a $50,000 starting job, and it's not abnormal anymore.
Yeah.
And so this whole like selling point of you can work more after you work in the fire department, like we've got to flip that as well.
Sure. Yeah, I can agree with that 100%. So this is a little bit easier question.
Yeah. Well, I ain't solving that other problem, so I don't fucking care.
So question number 5, what is your favorite book and or audio book, podcast, whatever something though that if you had to recommend to everybody listening to the show, hey, if you haven't read this or you haven't listened to this, go read this, go listen to this. What would you say would be your go-to, your favorite? And I know you probably have a few that really stand out, but I'm just curious if you have one that kind of pops in your head, like, hey, take this book, do yourself a favor, and read this.
Yeah, war fighting.
Okay.
USMC Manual War Fighting. That's a phenomenal book. It's everything about the fire department without being anything like about the fire department. And Nick Ledeen kind of summarizes it that way, and I would agree with him. That book's awesome. We can go down that rabbit hole, but war fighting's probably one of my favorite. Outlaw Platoon, as a young or new officer, I think everybody should read that in their new capacity when they're an officer, and that's how to really change a culture. That's about 10th Mountain in Afghanistan and Sean Parnell, and that's a great book. Those two are certainly up there. There's loads of them, but I think from the fire department standpoint, war fighting, and from an officer standpoint, Outlaw Platoon.
I dig it. All right, so here we go. Oprah, Barbara Walters, your wife. Never mind. Just kidding. I won't throw that question out.
I'd get creative.
I know you would. I don't want to incriminate you though.
Thank you, Barry.
All right, question number 6, last question in rapid fire. Here we go. If you had one piece of advice for firefighters struggling with a culture in their fire department, what would it be?
You can't shame a shitbag, and there's things that your circle of influence is all you can control. But that circle of influence certainly grows. Like we call it Operation Trojan Horse. You start with 1, then that person becomes 2, and then they become 4. And like that circle of influence certainly can expand. But if you only got 2 or 3 people listening and you're trying to bark up and take this from experience as somebody that screwed this up royally, you try and go outside that circle and just start swinging haymakers, it's not going to go well. So, start with what you can control. Like, if your culture in your department isn't the greatest, well, what about the culture of your crew? And if, let's say, you can't win the officer over of your fireman, but you can win your partner over, well, like, there, you just started that. And then at some point you get promoted or that guy moves off, and like now that zygote's expanded to more cells, and now you're starting to really start going with it. And there has to be this, like, sometimes you just can't shame a shitbag. And, it's certainly, when you focus on getting yourself right and not allowing, them to live rent free in your head, like that helps a lot tremendously. Because, it's kind of like that saying, wrestling with a pig. Like at the end of the day, he's happy, you're dirty, and the pig won. Because you went into the wallow that you weren't supposed to. So I think if you have remember all the reasons like why you love this job and why you do it, and if you love the fire service with all your heart, it'll love you back more ways and provide more ways than you absolutely thought it was possible. So don't get discouraged. Keep grinding and find that like-minded individual in your crew, your department, whatever. And I think that to tie this in with that other question of what's one of the biggest problems in the fire service, we aren't developing effective agents of change. And once we start, we really need to focus on like how to impact change in the department, impact change in the organization. I always joke there should be an FDIC class on how to communicate to a white shirt. And if you're that firefighter that is trying to get it, like you need to understand like what they're going to look for, what they want, and how to inception that concept to make them either think it's their idea or to get them on board with it.
Yeah, dude, on the freaking head. I can tell you because I've been in that same place where beating your head against that proverbial wall, and trying to push outside of that circle of influence, and it's easy to get discouraged. It's easy to get beat down, and I think like you said, man, you got to channel that energy into your own development and in the development, the people that are listening, the people that you can influence, the people that, and I love that, you can't shame a shit bag. I mean, you're spot on. You will waste so much energy and time and just frustrate yourself to no end, because there's some people that you will never influence. There's some people that you will never change, and you got to be okay with that, man. It took me a long time, of being buffeted to realize like, the only thing that's happening here is I'm getting frustrated and angry. And then, all I'm doing is, the people that would listen to me might not, now because I've made an ass of myself.
Yeah.
Now you shut that door because they're like, oh man, he lost his cool, or,
and you clock out and you're fucking thinking about it. And that dude clocks out and he's thinking about what's for breakfast at Waffle House. Like you were gone. And you're allowing them to live rent free in your head. It's affecting everything you do.
No, that's a fact, man. So, it really comes down to, invest in, keep grinding, put it in the work for, yourself, your crew. And eventually here's the thing, like, it took me a while to realize this, man. Like if you do that and you find the right people, the right circle, right? Eventually the right people are going to notice. And even people that maybe stand on the outside and don't ever tell you, there's a lot of people that watch that consistency over time that, all of a sudden you don't even know it. But secretly, they're like, man, like this, they're watching going, damn, this guy is like, really cares, really getting after it, like consistent day in and day out. And you never know, you may be winning people over that you don't even know you're winning over simply by being consistent and keeping a positive attitude and focusing on the stuff you can control. And
changes a long game, and changing your organization may be impacting the probationary firefighter that may be your boss one day. And then they're like, I remember this, like this is a priority,
Yeah.
The Afghanis have a saying of, you have the watch, but we have the time. And so it's a long game that you just, understand that you're making a long-term investment that you may never cash out, but somebody's going to.
Absolutely, man. Well, dude, thanks for coming on the show. Thank you for sharing your passion and like I said, dropping a little knowledge tonight on the episode. Definitely stoked to get this one sent out. A lot of good little nuggets. I think we're gonna dub this Martinez Monday. I think that'll be the name of the episode. Go. So
sweet.
No, but yeah, man, dude, really thoroughly enjoyed it. As always, good to talk to you. Hopefully, like I said, people listening to the episode will get some nuggets and some things that encourage them to go back and keep kind of keep pushing that needle forward, right? Keep it a little bit here, a little bit there. Goes a long way over the long run. So
all three people that listen to this, thank you for taking your time. And they're probably all Nick's family. So thank you guys for supporting Nick and everything that he
does. All right, brother, man. Well, like I said, dude, thanks for taking your time tonight. I know it's hot in your garage. So I certainly appreciate it. So
fat, I could use it.
And congrats on all the, a lot of changes coming down the pipe. Got to get the little one on the way. So that's pretty cool, man. A lot of big things happening for you. So proud to know you. Proud to see all the cool stuff you're getting done there in Cobb, and hopefully I'll see you on the flip side sooner than later, man.
Yeah, buddy. I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity, Nick, and it's cool to see you crushing it, man.
All right, brother. Take care.
See you, buddy.